She's already
Maybe Sue
loose.
can take you on a sumo.
He'll win easily.
I don't know about that.
Do we have any adjustments, modifications, changes?
That was pretty short.
Yeah. Well, the minutes were short. It's pretty much minutes. It's not a word-for-word kind of thing, so. If we don't see anything, all in those in favor of the minutes as presented to us, signify by raising your hand, please. And that would be unanimous. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 10 of us. By the way, 9 is a quorum, and we've passed the quorum, so we're good there. Let me turn back to the agenda. And is there a public comment? Anybody want to make a public comment? Then we will segue to paper copies. For those of you, there were 5, I believe, who asked if they could get paper copies instead of just the electronic copies. When they are made, they will appear in the Budget Committee mailbox, which is underneath the stairs. So if you're John, Dylan, Elizabeth, Steve, Richard, or Suzanne, that's where they should appear, okay? We have a summary report of the default, what's modified, the voted budget, let me put it that way, of the school district that we got. And are you here to help us analyze that? I know Suzanne is, but would you be here, Philip, to help us with that, or?
Is there a question?
I don't know yet. I haven't opened it up, so I didn't know if you were. And if you would entertain questions that Suzanne wouldn't want to do, and if you wanted to come up to the table with a chair or by the mic, it's up to you.
If there's something that I can do to provide assistance.
Yep.
To the representative from the
Okay.
school board, I will do my best.
Great, thank you. Do all of you have a copy of that?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
It seemed to me that there were already questions that were on the floor. Can we dispose of those now?
Sure.
Because the document that you have in front of you wasn't in hand, I don't think, when the questions were asked. So
Correct.
if they're pending questions, why don't we dispose of those, understanding that everybody may or may not have had the opportunity to review the document in its entirety.
Okay. Do you all see this thing here?
Do you have a paper copy? I have it somewhere.
Well, I have my paper copy.
You just have
yes.
one paper copy, okay.
I only have my one. And this was sent out
Yeah, if you give me a date. I
a
could-
couple of weeks ago.
5-1,
Oh, fine, okay. I'll find it.
sound right?
It was last month, April.
Oh, was it?
Today's the 11th, so I think
Mine
it
got
was
5-2 on them.
Yeah, I'm
5/2,
looking at
so you think it was
5-1,
May,
5-2.
so so it could be
That's
last
what's
week?
on the bottom of the page here. I
Okay,
don't
put
know.
it this way, those of you who had a question, relative to where we're going from here, I know Elizabeth ran one to me, but I'll ask that one later, after you guys get done. Is there a question you guys had last month that is lingering? Is that your hand, Bill, or are you just trying to open up your
No.
laptop?
I'm just
We were waving.
waving.
All right. So let's,
Well, I have one,
go ahead.
there's one that I thought was definitely on the table, and
I'm going through my notes, but go ahead.
it was, I'll just try to paraphrase it if I may.
Mhm.
There was comments made relative to the fact that since the school board had a default budget, why would there be a need to have, proposed staff reductions? Since the default budget includes all current staffing.
Yep.
Plus any contractual obligation. So that was I think it was a pretty all-encompassing question, but it was one that was on the table that didn't really get answered.
That is very similar to what Elizabeth had in her
Okay.
notes to me that she wanted me to share with you guys. Is that something,
Fine.
there,
Well, let's take a look at the list that's before you. I don't have it in front of me, but if my memory serves me, there are 2 columns on that list. One has to do with the default budget particularly. The other one has to do with the proposal that we anticipated from the governor. Am I correct?
2 sides. The front side is a variance from the proposed budget of the school board versus the default budget that was enacted. And on the back side, it's the additional, what's called the additional, proposed reductions because of a potential reduction in state revenues.
Are there questions on one side, the other side, or both?
Right now, the question is on the front side only, which is, there appears to be 4 teachers, 4 paraeducators, and funds for a secretary totaling $357,000 that go into the cost reduction proposal from what was submitted by the school board to get to the default. And I guess the question could be answered a couple ways.
Well, I want to make sure that I understand what the question is.
Sure.
Because there's an assumption, I think, implicit in the question, and that is that the default number is based on something other than a number and includes everything that you've described it as including. So,
I don't think
To
so.
appreciate what the question is, I guess I need to understand what the understanding of the default is.
Okay, let me go through that. The default budget, as I have it, includes, now this is the default, and what's interesting about the page as we received it, it goes from the proposed school budget down to the default.
Okay.
And for instance, if there had been additional teachers in the proposed budget that wasn't into the default, and then they show a reduction of teachers, then there's no reduction of personnel.
In fairness, that's an answer that includes the very assumption that I'm trying to get some clarity around.
Okay.
And that is, as far as you're concerned, the default budget is actually a market basket of goods that includes certain things.
It includes,
What does it
Okay.
include other than a number?
it includes the funding for all positions that currently existed at the time of the creation of the default budget, so which would have been last November, December, and any contractual changes to contractual obligations, and in this case, the reduction in debt service. And that's what the default budget. Something in addition, Scott?
Yeah, I guess, maybe to put proper context in it, the default budget is a number. And it's a number that's based upon, the prior year's, the prior year's budget plus or minus any contractual obligations, one-time expenditures. We've been through that. But I guess what specifically is fluid in the Goffstown school budget, which I know that having been a part of it, it is somewhat fluid. What has changed? Many times on the town side, we budgeted a certain amount of money for fuel oil and gasoline, and then now all of a sudden, things have gone crazy, so we are gonna be under budget. So therefore, even if you had a default budget, you're gonna have to rob Peter to pay Paul for whatever that is. Are there any other, I've heard from talking to people that there were certain grant-funded positions that were one-time expenditures from federal funds that are going away. And those were grant-funded positions for students that might have been placed out of district that were brought in district. Again, if I'm speaking out of school, then cut me off, but if those are the types of things that we have to educate these kids, the money went away, so therefore, we may have to reduce teachers in one area to have teachers or maintain a program which we need in another, and I think that's what we're trying to ascertain.
I think that's the explanation I gave you folks last month. The emotionally handicapped program at Bartlett was grant-funded this current year. We're not gonna get grant funds for next year, so we have to find the money in the default budget to pay for those positions, because you don't wanna send them out of district, it costs 2-3 times as much.
Right, but I guess specifically, how much are we talking about? Is that a $200,000 expense? It's a $1.1 roughly million difference, so does that account for 300,000, 100, 500, and that?
I don't have the
Yeah.
numbers with me.
Let me give some perspective to the default budget calculation. The default budget, the total budget for the general fund for all warrant articles that they are in right now was 34,376,161. That's what it was in right now. There was adjustments, net adjustments to get to a default for an additional $239,290. These are just general funds, not the fund for special revenue or food services. In that, the details that say, remember I said bonds and interest reduction? There was a $349,390 reduction to that. But salaries, taxes, and benefits for existing staff was an increase of $1,353,484. That was a big, so it went from 24,980 to 26,333, and that's the number that's calculated. But you got to say, well, if there was only a $239,000 increase, it's got to be something else different. Well, according to the worksheet that we got from the school board, special education services, excluding salaries and stuff, was a reduction of $668,667. I don't know what that entails, but that's the biggest thing. Then they had some other contractual professional development for teachers that went down by $39,600. There was some natural gas. There must have been a favorable pricing of $17,450, but then electricity went up $13,202. SAU services went down $26,445. And this is the default calculation spreadsheet that we got that shows those differences. And I think that might be what's sparking some of the questions. If the salaries went from roughly 25 million to 26,333, there's something else happening. Does that get you closer to where your question was, Philip? To what we expected a default budget entailed?
I'm not sure that it really does. Part of the difficulty I think we experience, and let's take for instance paraprofessionals.
Okay.
Paraprofessionals exist to serve a specific need. If a student comes in September of a year, is identified as a special education student, has a 504 plan, the plan is put together and that plan calls for a paraeducator. And we're talking in September of the base year 0. That plan is for the entire year, okay? Literally in September of the year, we begin preparing the budget for the next year, right? That person's plan calls for a paraeducator who becomes part of that budget and goes forward. That student's IEP is revisited and reevaluated in the spring, typically after the budget has already been voted on.
Okay.
If that person, that individual student, no longer has a need for the paraprofessional in their IEP, but because the need existed when the budget was crafted, those dollars were included because there was no way of knowing that
Right.
things were going to change at the time the budget was crafted.
Yep, agreed.
Then, when we're in March of the following year, and we're looking at needs and where cuts might need to be made, that need for the paraprofessional no longer exists.
Yep. And so you have some fundings.
Of student-driven educational 504 need.
Okay.
So, where do you go? Where do you go to find money in order to reduce costs? That's where you go. Those things either typically appear as cuts or end up as money that goes back to the taxpayers at the end of the year. In this particular case, there were 4, if I recall correctly, 4 paraeducators who sort of fit into that broad category of falling out. 3 of them were actually from ascending districts,
Okay.
as opposed to in the district. So when you look at the budget and the process, it's dynamic. So things that are requested as part of the appropriation, whether it's fuel oil, which, as Scott's already pointed out, we're underwater on after having $40,000 of oil cut out as part of the cuts that this committee recommended. We're now another if that is counted, we're now another $200,000 underwater because of the increase in price currently. Now, we haven't locked in at that, it'd be silly. You know, we're trying to figure out how to deal with a price increase that's over $1 more than we predicted. I'm guessing had we predicted a price like that, somebody here would look at that and go, well, why on earth would you predict a price at $1 more than you guessed at based upon the current price in September, October, November of last year? You simply couldn't look at that and justify it. You make your best guess. But so we're making up $200,000 plus something that was already taken out that represents about $40,000 out of the default budget. So I guess one of the most important things to understand is the dynamic nature of this process, an appropriations process, and a spending process.
Mhm.
And we have a lot of things that don't sync up. Ideally, it would be far easier if we got our dollars on September 1st and spent them until the following September 1st. That doesn't happen. So there are things that change because the needs in the institutions change. And we make our best guesses when we budget, and we make our cuts where we can, when we need to make them.
So, of the positions that we're looking at that are being adjusted from the default budget, they were both in the default budget and they were also in the proposed budget. There were 4 paraeducators that aren't needed currently for the next year, which starts July 1, for the next school year. There are 4 teacher positions. Were there any additional teacher positions that was in the requested budget that wasn't in the default budget? I believe there were some.
The default budget is,
Don't get hung up on the default budget, because
Hold on, the teacher
the
at Bartlett.
funding for the default budget was for every position that existed on November 1st.
It was a
Every
new-
position.
There's a new third grade teacher at Bartlett budgeted for September, right? They're getting the room ready.
I think.
So that's a teaching
and I
position.
stand to be corrected if I'm wrong on this, but I think there was.
I thought there were 7 teachers, some of them were being funded from the other sending schools. Or maybe it was,
Those
they were all
paraeducators.
paraeducators. But what I'm looking for now, teachers, was there a head count increase from this current year to what you were requesting in your budget?
Yes. Bartlett. Third grade at Bartlett.
I'm gonna, I actually am
Okay.
gonna have to check on that.
What do you have, Guy?
I got a comment and a couple of quick questions, if I can,
Is it
related to
on-
this.
related?
Yes.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
First of all, my comment would be, Chairman Pankos, you made mention of the fact that you suffered an additional $40,000 loss on the oil line due to the cuts recommended by this committee. It's irrelevant. Our budget never made it to the ballot.
No, I understand
Okay?
that.
All right. The other thing I want to point out here is that the first sheet shows $1.094 million difference between your requested budget and the budget that passed, the default budget, both of which were calculated by you. When I asked the questions at the last meeting, I'm not interested in the reductions that you made from your request to what was granted. I want to know why the budget that was granted, the default budget that the school board prepared, had money for all the teachers we had on staff with their raises, and then now we're told that some of those teachers are gonna lose their jobs. I'd like to know, one, are any of those positions vacant or new? And two, if not, where is the money being redirected away from these teachers' salaries that were completely funded when you calculated the default budget, presented it to the voters, and they voted it in? That's what we're looking to find out.
Now that I know your particular question, we'll be happy to get back to you. I
Well-
mean, I think that's fair, and you provided a very clear and concise question.
Okay. That's what I'm looking to find out. That's what I was looking for last meeting.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that came through, but thank you very much.
Would you know off the top of your head if,
I'm not gonna guess, but if I do know something off the top of my head, I will.
if any of the positions that the school board has announced will be cut, are those positions filled?
I'm not gonna err.
Because you
on
can't
that.
cut a teacher that doesn't exist.
I'm not going to err on the answer to that.
Okay.
It wouldn't be fair to you.
Okay. Can you give me an idea when we might
Yeah,
get
that's
this information?
what I want.
At a minimum, it won't be any later than my personal appearance at your next meeting.
I'd certainly like to request it ahead of time so we get a chance to study it. Perhaps you could accommodate 3 weeks from tonight?
We'll get it to you just as quickly as we can.
Appreciate that.
I'm not sure that a yes or a no presents study advantages, but if it's as simple as yes or no, that's fine. If it's yes or no with further explanation.
My perspective, it would provide study advantage because it would allow me to formulate further questions should they arise.
Okay.
Okay?
Can we try, I mean, really, because instead of it being sort of a ask, answer, are there other questions that follow along the same line that we can try to prepare answers for that you know of now?
Not without getting the information I asked for last month.
So based upon the information that you have today, and the information that's been provided, you don't have any other questions other than what you've asked today?
The information that was provided is not related in any way to the questions I asked last month.
Pertaining to personnel. Scott,
Correct.
you have something.
So that's the extent of the questions with regard to the cuts that were made pertaining to personnel.
Well, I'd like to see why, to put it simply, where the money for these teachers is being redirected to. The teachers that were funded in the default budget that are now gonna lose their jobs, I'd wanna know where the money's being redirected to. What lines is that amount of money going? Because these
So-
teachers
so
were funded
if
on
in
March
fact-
8th.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand
you.
what your question is. I may come back with a couple of different pieces of information that are responsive to that.
Okay.
But ultimately, we'll get to the last piece.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, I'm gonna try to, if I can, simplify it, because I think we've got some answers from Sue. If we had hypothetically 4 grant positions for teachers for a program, and that grant went away, there is still a need to have 4 teachers for a particular behavioral program. The grant goes away, so we still need those 4 teachers. And then I see a list here that 2 teachers and 4 or 5 paraeducators are going to not have jobs, potentially.
Well,
So-
that list is,
So-
that's coming off the proposed budget.
Right, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that, to me, I can understand if you have, say, 4 teachers that are grant funded, you lose the grants, well, you still need the teachers, so you're gonna have to rob Peter to pay Paul. So they may take, if they need 4 teachers at, say, Bartlett School for a special program, and that's grant funded, it goes away, they still need those 4 teachers, but they may take one from Mountain View or the high school because they need to reallocate the resource to still service that same need because
First thing
the
we
money
need to
went away.
do is to understand whether or not those 4 grant teachers, we know they were in the proposed budget, but we need to find out whether they were in the default budget.
Correct.
Of the 4 teachers that are showing as grant, Suzanne, you look like,
Yeah, I think we've got the question. I think.
do we have the answer?
I think I've responded that we're gonna provide the information based upon what's there. And I think
Okay.
Scott's right about the function. I think we need to nail down, exactly what happened in this particular case. And in fairness to this group, to the extent that the cuts are important in informing the appropriation, we'll get an answer to that question.
The one thing that there aren't any cuts. There's an actual $239,290 increase.
Okay.
And that's the basis from where our questions are coming, not the other side, and that's why I think it's getting more confusing.
So what you're saying is you have a $200,000+ increase in the appropriation,
Yes.
and in spite of having a $1.3 million increase in expenditures for teachers, I mean, are you including those two things together?
The 1.35 million for the, is part of the net 239, because there were other reductions to get there. And that might have been grants that weren't being funded anymore. And that's the only way I can think of, you're gonna lose $669,000 in special education salaries. I mean, or services, not salaries, no salaries there, so it can't be that.
I'll make one comment. I don't believe we're allowed to put grant-funded positions in the default, but we will check on that too.
Okay.
I believe the superintendent made that comment, so, but we'll double check.
Okay, it'd be nice to know that. I'd be surprised because,
You have to pay them. It's just,
Yeah, I
the
mean-
revenue comes from a different source,
right.
but
But this happens to be general funds we're looking at anyway, not, if they came in the grant, they would have been in a special revenue fund. And so I think Sue is correct in her piece, because if those were funded, because that went up from 510,500 to 670,000. And I'm talking about the general fund piece of the appropriation. We can add the increase of 159,500 to that and come up with a bigger net default, if you wanna call it that. That was just the general fund piece.
I don't understand what you just said.
There are 3 pieces to the default budget.
Okay.
I only gave you one, which is the general fund, not the special fund where we get grant funds from. So that isn't part of it. Just makes it more confusing. I think the committee was trying to start from the default budget that got passed, rather than starting from the request of that went before the people. And that's where we're looking at the numbers from 2 different sections, and I think that's what's, the questions are surrounding. But you understand what Guy was looking for and where Scott was mentioning.
I'm gonna make sure that I
Okay.
do word for word off the tape, and so that I get the answer to the question you asked.
You had further questions?
Nope, I'll be happy to email you my question.
That's all right. I'm gonna trust wherever it is,
Andrew?
because I've always been able to hear really clear, and so we'll just pick it up off the tape.
Well, let's be doubly sure, I'll email you anyways.
Well, you do that.
To Philip at
Actually,
Comcast.
let's.
You
I mean,
can- you can-
Just to try to do what we've been consistent in doing, and no, that's not my email.
It's
No,
info,
Philip.
info, it's,
Pancos at
no,
Comcast.net.
no, it's info at goffstown
And
dot,
the way to solve this problem is, Dan's been terrific
Okay.
about passing along information and inquiries.
lucky me.
Yeah, just,
Well, I have a co-chair, I have a vice chair. He could do it too, if that,
that's true.
yeah.
Be happy to.
In fact, I would like in this particular, because it doesn't sound like the way I've been requesting information, and hasn't seemed to hit as good of an anchor as, so if you would take the questions from the committee and copy me on your,
Absolutely.
and I will give you the email address, it's the info at goffstown.k12.nh.us. And that'll go directly to a distribution list, I'm presuming, which is Philip, Stacy, and Ray. At least used to be.
I can tell you only that it will get to me.
Okay.
I can't tell you who else it will go to.
Fun stuff. But that entailed what Elizabeth's question was too, so, there's nothing else I have to do there.
I have a,
Yes.
if I may.
Sure.
The school board, at the indulgence of the chair and the entire committee, because I think ultimately it may take a vote, but you guys decide that, would ask your indulgence and permission to allow Ms. Thoreau to sit with Ms. Tremblay at these meetings and to provide assistance, and it will give her the opportunity to watch, observe, and learn the process. We do not anticipate that she would have a vote, simply
She,
capable of being present, and at the table if it makes sense.
let me take that under advisement, because there's, one thing is, are you what's the word I'm looking
She'll
for?
serve as the alternate.
She's gonna serve as the alternate, okay. There is something in the statute that talks about alternates, whether they sit at the table or not. We already have 16 members. They're- She's welcome to be here,
I understand that.
okay. We will do if we can, I think.
I would also ask this, because it's part of an educational process.
Yep.
And because after a year, Jennifer has a great learning curve, but as you all know, digesting, lots of budgets is extraordinarily difficult. With ours being the largest, probably the most difficult. And so getting a decent understanding of how this process works would be terrific. And at the discretion of the chair, to the extent that Jennifer has questions, will you indulge those questions as opportunity exists?
Again, let me reflect and check with the sources that I normally do on those who had prepared the legislation. At first glance, if that would occur, then it would, could occur to 3 other appointed positions on the board where, from the Goffstown Village Water District, the Grassmere Village Water District, and the alternate from the town. And so we could almost have 20 people around the table asking questions. And the statute, from my recollection, was clear that only one from each of the governing boards would sit and ask questions. And if,
Ultimately, the
understand,
decision
as the
is
education, we might be able to
either
do
the
that.
chair or the committee.
So that would be something that we will,
I'm making the request of the chair
Sure.
as the head of the committee.
I think what I will do is let me research the statute, see if we can do that, and at the next meeting, we'll probably take it under and we'll discuss it. And we can come up with that.
So
To
if
find
we-
out.
maybe
As an
an
edu-
item on the-
we'd probably put it under an item on the agenda. Or we might be able to get it to it as we go to new business. If we want to bring it up, we could discuss it tonight. Scott?
I just wanted to say that I think a lot of this dialogue over the last 5 minutes, I think, is a lot of crap. And I'll say that for the reason that in years past, we had people ask questions, it's all this formal mailbox nonsense, and out the check, and for crying out loud, I mean, let's all ask the questions, let's all, get the answers, and everything's now formal and this and that, it's just nuts. Everything is on tape. As far as I'm concerned, if you have a question, I'll try to answer it. If I can't, I will send an email to Sue DeRusso. She will then get it back to you. It's just, this whole protocol thing is just driving me crazy. And, we'll take things under advisement. I don't know who the emails will go to, and it's just like, Sue is the rep. If there's a question, if Sue doesn't know the answer, she'll send a note to Stacy, copy you, and get the answer back, and it just seems like this is just nutty. I just don't get it, and it takes a long time, and it all makes us like jackasses, to be honest with you, so, whatever. Just wanted to say my mind.
For whatever it's worth, the effort is to get it to be streamlined and to make sure that, to the extent that there are individual questions around the table, that at least somebody becomes the gatekeeper for that. Because I don't think, I wouldn't want anybody from the school board going off and doing whatever they saw fit and asking questions of the budget committee on their own unless they were there representing the board. And so the effort really, I think, in the past has been designed to make sure that there's a gatekeeper. If Mr. Karen is the gatekeeper, terrific, but it allows things to get funneled, as opposed to something going through a channel to, say, the superintendent and the board not really ever being cognizant of it.
And I agree with that. I think
And
that.
if there's a way to accomplish
Right.
that.
And I don't think that 1 or 2 people who want to ask a bazillion questions, we cannot act individually. We do act as a board. So if this committee decides that we want information, and we vote, and we ask for the information, so be it. I don't think anybody wants to get bogged down, but I just think that it's gotten to the point where this is a great time to start afresh. There's a lot of new members. It's a good time to start fresh and create relationships and get the answers to the questions and move on. And if the questions are onerous and they take so much time, let's have that discussion, we'll take a vote, and if we all agree that this board wants it, great. If not, then we don't get the information.
Mr. John?
I just want to, Scott's earlier statement at the beginning about, what was the correct words?
Crap.
Okay, crap. I just want to say that we're starting off this year because, a good start, because I agree again with Scott. So I just want that on the record. That we should stop this horse and pony game. Because the school is just gonna drag out the information to us like they did last year. So let's just call it right.
Dan, can I
stopping
ju-
it.
No, can I just say
Well,
something?
let's just cut right to the
As someone from the
chase.
outside looking in, seriously, like, as
You
not
know,
being a
could
politician,
we
wait,
have a
I just
point
have
of order?
one thing to say.
We
I
can,
just-
we can do it one at a time if we could,
Yeah,
please.
can I go next?
Well-
Get a minute for me to speak?
Well,
Just put
you
your
know,
hand
it's
up, I
just,
gotcha.
it was just frustrating last year, and we're going right down the same path
Before,
this year.
before we go down that road, we have a current item on the board right now. Hold that thought, and we'll get right to it.
I have to write it
That
down.
we have a piece of paper, all right? Any further questions on the generality of the piece of paper we got?
Can I ask Mike, because there are two sides to this, and I think they generate.
There's always two
different kinds-
sides.
No, I mean two sides to the piece of paper.
There's information on both sides.
And they generate two different sorts of questions because the decisions on one are different from the matrix that we used on the other.
I don't remember hearing any questions based on the school board's proposed additional reductions due to losses of additional revenue. It
Okay.
all surrounded the
I just
town
wanted to make
vote.
sure that we were square, that we're basically working from one side of the piece of paper.
Well, I'm just saying that if there's a question, why can't it be answered within a week? Why does it take, next meeting? That's,
That would be pertinent
you know,
within it, so.
and I just want to thank Scott for his statement.
Yeah. It was my earliest request that the gatekeeper could be Suzanne and Scott and each of the representatives of the assigned boards. That was my preference. That wasn't the preference from, I'm not sure if it was a school board or Mr. Pancoast or something that was.
That actually, Mr. Cloutier, that never came to me.
I
It's
did
not
have
my
some,
recollection.
okay, I will forward you, rather than take time in the meeting, I will re-forward the email I sent you. If that could be a process, that's a process that I feel is one of the reasons the legislation was passed to actually have a representative from a governing board sit at this committee, is to provide that segue, that gateway.
And ask a question, yeah, I think that was what it is. I think that one of the things that may help us work on that is how we deal with, do you have a laptop? Can I throw you under the bus?
No.
No?
Well, she has a,
All right,
one
but-
assigned from the school potentially?
Let's figure this out.
Okay.
And I think there may be at least an easy solution for getting things that happen here that the budget committee would like.
Okay.
And decides is information that they need that will inform the process, the appropriations process, then maybe we can at least get that funneled on a direct path sooner. By
Okay.
simply doing it, and I can remember sitting here with Scott 5, 6 years ago, having it work really nicely.
It did.
So maybe we can get closer to that.
Okay. Anybody else have any further questions
Well, you were gonna get
on-
back to me, but I'll just throw it out there. I guess all I was gonna say was, looking at this from an outsider, what is the big mystery in sending it? We have a meeting, we have a question at the end of the night.
Yeah.
Guy or you, we all have laptops, we send an email to Phil asking the question. He gets it in 30 seconds. I mean, I guess I don't understand, I don't get it.
It was a request from the school board that it be funneled through me. That's the only
All
reason.
right, so we're all here, we have the question by the end of the night, you send it while we're still here.
I would rather not have to do that because one, you guys then are filtering it through my words and and I may not get it right.
Listen, Guy just asked the question, and I wrote it down, I mean,
Right.
so you say, Guy, what's your question about the teachers?
Right.
Is this what you wanna ask?
I
You
did
ask
not
you
write it
send
down. I didn't write it
No,
down.
but it was
I
an
would-
example, it's
Can
an
I-
example, he tells you the question, you repeat it back, you email it, I mean, I guess,
I'm running the meeting, I don't wanna do two things. How's
Okay,
that?
well, so
Can I-
then.
What's wrong with you writing it and sending it? Copy us
Who,
all.
you?
Yeah, well, just a minute, we
Minute.
gotta, let's go back a little bit, a few years.
Okay.
When what was happening was questions were being directed to the business administrator, to the superintendent, by various budget committee
I'm not
members.
saying that, I'm saying.
No, no, listen, please. So what was determined was a system of one individual funneling the questions to the SAU.
Got it, get
Because
it.
they are not gonna respond to an individual budget committee member.
I don't believe I suggested that.
No, I didn't say you did.
Okay,
But it's not just simply hitting a button and sending the question. It needs to be sent to the right person.
And I'm gonna assign that role for the moment to Guy. You all
Okay.
have his email address. He'll keep me apprised of what's happening.
And the other
so
thing
that-
is, the system that was being used up until there seems to be a problem in funneling the questions from chair to chair was a decision that was made at a board meeting to help alleviate this problem of every Tom, Dick, and Harry sending
This is a few,
questions.
this is a few years ago, right?
Yeah, this is not that many years ago.
3, I think. I remember all the
Two
questions.
or three, yeah. So, I mean, and if that system is gonna change, the board's gonna have to take it up. Because they're the ones that made the decision and endorsed that particular,
Before I go to Scott, you guys okay? You had
no, I mean, I guess I
No,
still
no.
don't,
more things to say about the question.
yes,
Go ahead.
more things to say. about the
Go
question. I guess my question is, if we have a question, like, if this is the example I'm giving, Guy had a question last meeting, still has the question. Phil's gonna look it up on a tape. I mean, why can't we just send that question and Phil answers it? And then we don't have to talk about the question because we have the information. I don't get it, I just don't
I-
understand, and no, but wait a minute, Dan, you just said because I don't wanna take the time
No,
of the
no, no.
meeting to do that.
You were, I heard you pointing to me to take that question verbatim as the meeting is on and
No,
send it out.
Well,
That's
not
how what I
I said at the
understood.
end, okay, well, what I meant to say is, at the end of the meeting, whatever.
that's what we were doing.
Yeah, it never meant it by the end of the meeting. At the end of the
Well,
meeting, I don't wanna sit here
Not
and.
the end of the meeting, the next day, whenever.
Sure.
Several committee members would have very similar, if not the same questions. And Dan would go through them, make sure we're not asking the same question 10 different ways.
3 years
and
ago,
pass
when
it
that
on.
happened, there were many, many questions coming from diverse individuals asking about the same thing. And that's when it started, so what it did is I filtered all the questions in, but they were coming to me in writing. It wasn't me taking notes at a meeting, because sometimes taking notes, no matter whether it's verbatim, if you get the opportunity to write it, look at it, and then send it to me or to Guy, he can then take a look at it, because there's something that happens when you're able to sit down and write the question. You can look at it, you can read it and say, I wanted to frame it a different way to make it clearer, or less, so that would be a process that could work if you wanted it to.
All right, I would just propose this. If Guy is going to be the person, then as we're having discussions, his laptop is usually up, or anyone else for that matter, he will write down the questions as we're going through it. And there's gonna be times when, if only Checker has a question, and she just wants to know how many teachers have, a master's degree, and if that has absolutely nothing to do with the budget process, then we could say, you know what, Checker, that's a great question, I'm glad that you want that answer, but it doesn't really have any impact on the budget, so therefore we're not going to ask the school board that question. So I think, in this particular case, last year, the majority of the membership wanted the answer to your question, and therefore it would go. But each of us individually just can't go to the principal at the high school or to this one and say, can you give me this information? Or, by the way, I'd like to see this report. We don't have that individual authority. We don't. We act- we act
Unless you're
collectively.
assigned to the principal and that's part of your
Correct, but
monthly
we-
talking,
right,
but
but
yeah.
we
As a
act-
group, we
act
try
as
to
a
make
group.
it.
Our
as a-
power is as a
yes,
group and as a
absolutely.
vote, not one individual. So,
Absolutely.
that being the case, as we go around, if there is a question that the majority of this group wants to get an answer to, whether it be the selectmen,
I'm
the water,
trying to
right,
say.
exactly.
I'm not
You're
saying you're
typing,
right,
you're
but-
typing it out, and at the end of the night, Guy's hitting the send button, and it's gonna be
Could be.
copied, and that's it, it's done. And it's-
be.
and I think
Let me,
it's
I'm
easy.
gonna get Guy in a second. Hang on to that.
It should be
Jennifer, you had a
copied,
comment to
too,
make?
Right, it's
Yeah.
easy.
So I was gonna defer, but now after Scott made that comment, which helped me kind of figure out how to frame this, I think that there needs to remain a possibility that if I have a question that maybe the majority isn't on the same page with me, it may be something that I need to help figure out, and I'll quantify it with a question that I brought up this past budget season, probably right around this time last year, being a new member, where we were talking about the phone system, the school phone system, and whether or not there were a series of charges that we weren't sure how many were based on teachers moving from one classroom to another, or whether the phones were actually being repaired in a classroom. I wanted to know, what is the difference? How many teachers moved from this classroom to this classroom back and forth? How many were moves and how many were repairs? So we could figure out how much of this money is actually going to paying to repair this phone system, and how much is going to the convenience of moving a teacher back and forth. And that question was deemed as not important, but it was important to me. So I guess
Really?
I don't want to like
Sure.
drill questions for hours and hours and hours, and how are we going to ask the question? Who's going to ask the question? What's the correct, the
Right,
correct
but I-
English
but
to
that's
use
a
in asking the
great-
question?
That's a great point.
But do you, does that
And I
make
think we're
sense?
gonna have to be somewhat, in the past, I have taken on that role.
I'm
as-
not
on
criticizing you at
behalf- I
all,
think I
dare I
asked
say
the
that,
budget
but-
committee for permission to
Mhm.
take on that role in between, so if you were doing some studying on the finances and you had a question, and you had sent it to me, and I determined that, in my own mind, that is something that I believe the board would want, I would forward the question, and so I would have the question and answer for you at the next meeting. That was something that this group in the past had allowed me to do. In fairness to your question, we were talking about a budget, and what had happened was, they were looking to get to an IP phone system where the IT staff could make those changes, and you wanted to see the relative amount of the comparison. From what I remember, that was a good question, and I thought we got
Didn't get an answer to that particular piece, but that's, and that I just, there are times that, can we, as a budget committee member, can I say, if it's Guy, could you please phrase it this way? Because I know that I'm gonna capture the answer that I need by asking the question that way.
Okay.
And I think, we're all intelligent people and can do that at times, and then there are other times that, if there are four of the same questions, it absolutely makes sense. But maybe there could be a pass back to me, like, hey, Jen, I'm gonna reword this. Are you okay with this? Are you still gonna get the answer that you're looking for?
Then let me do this, Guy, what are your thoughts on this process, and then I'm gonna put out a motion for the floor
My
for a
thought is
request
that,
of what to do.
Scott brought up a good point. You wanna know how many teachers have a master's degree? I think it's just, if we just use common sense. If you wanna know how many teachers got a master's degree, I'm gonna ask Sue, and she'll get it to me. It's not gonna affect my budget-making process. But other than that, if somebody has a question, normally it will be discussed here, and if it isn't, send me an email. Email would be the best thing, because I'm not trying and losing maybe some flavor to what you're by trying to interpret what you're asking. Just send me an email, and I'll copy everybody with the response, and I'll request a reply all, and if we don't get a reply all, then I'll forward the response I get. But, it's just common sense. It's pretty simple stuff, and if everybody keeps it simple, makes an effort to answer the question shortly and clearly, we're gonna be fine.
Before I make the.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess I have some issues with that, because all of us can come and funnel questions through you, okay? And I'm not saying that your question doesn't have any value, but at what point, if all of us I have 3 or 4 questions a week, and we're all funneling it through to Guy, and then Guy sends a note off, because we wanna know, how many people have master's degrees? How often did it take the trash out at the high school? And by the way, do we have energy-saving protocols here? And before you know it, we have an administration who's just responding to our questions, and they don't drive any type of decision-making, so.
Can we get back to reality,
Right, but the
though?
reality is
That
that.
hasn't happened.
Okay.
It hasn't happened, it's never happened. In 8 years, it has never happened in between budget committee members where that has occurred. So what I'm suggesting is, and what I'm gonna have for a motion is that we go ahead and we allow that to occur, and we give it a month, see what happens. If it ends up being something like that, then we can put a clamp down on it. How's that?
And the only thing that I would request then, if that's the case, is that when you send that question, those inquiries, if you copy all of us, then all of us see what questions
Yes,
are
we,
going.
we,
And then we all,
should
right,
not
and then we
only-
all can
not only
be the
the
judge
answers,
and arbiter of whether
but
or not
all
we're.
the questions,
Yep.
because it hasn't happened, and I don't see it happening, and we can modify this as we go into the budget discussions. I can see it being modified. This is only during, and if we take any time off during the summer, that might be a good thing for us. And if it starts getting out of control, totally agree with you, and I think we ought to just bring it down. Sue?
Yeah, I'm confused. We will respond to questions from the budget committee.
Mhm.
Things that are brought up, discussed, information you want here at a meeting.
Mhm.
But when you go home and you look and say, oh, I think I'd really like to know about this, we're not gonna respond to that.
That's
We're
what my
gonna
motion.
respond to
No,
budget
no,
committee
no.
questions.
Listen to my motion.
Okay,
Okay, because my motion is going to entail that. My motion includes those items that I have been given authority in the past to act on behalf of the Budget Committee. So what I'm gonna do as part of my motion is to ask, my motion is that we give Guy to act on behalf of the Budget Committee for motions or for questions that come up during a meeting and in between meetings to make his own guarded decision whether these are pertinent, to pass them along as official questions of the Budget Committee and get answers so that, and make sure everybody's copied on the questions and all the answers so that they'd be available for us at the next Budget Committee. This would be for a 1-month trial,
Can I ask just one question?
not at the moment. I'm in the middle of the motion. I'd like to,
I'm sorry, I thought you were saying that was the motion you were going to.
that is kind of the motion. I mean, is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. You know what I'm saying, is I don't think it's gonna go over. I have rarely seen a time where people are looking at either financials, and that's usually that brings something up, or you've seen something in the paper, you've heard something at a school board meeting, and if it becomes to that level, there's a couple of questions that I have had. Waiting 3 weeks to get to a budget committee, to then have to ask the question, to wait another 4 weeks to get an answer, you're 7 weeks out. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to have to make decisions. I would like to give the authority, in this case, well, I'll give it to Guy, in Guy's absence, me, the chair and vice chair, to be able to act on behalf of the Budget Committee, even though it wasn't a valid motion or discussion at this meeting until we get there. Okay? Mr. Bates, did you second that?
Yes, I did.
Would you like to comment on it? And then I have
mean,
Scott.
my comment is just pretty straightforward. You know, this is not unusual to this committee or to this town, so I think flow of information that way is fine, and you can police people who abuse it, since there's never been an abuse in 8 years. I trust you'll speak to the abusers if it happens, and just leave it at that for now. We can always change it later. That's it.
Scott?
I'm a reluctant yes, and the reason, my reservations are that we don't ask any of the Board of Selectmen or the school board to go on a wild goose chase. But I think by the fact that we're gonna be all getting a copy of it, if it becomes an issue, then we're all gonna collectively talk about it, and I just wanna know the name of the person who asked the question. That's the only other thing I want. So if Jen has a question about IP phone systems, I wanna know that it's Jen, so that when we do get back together again, if I have issue with it, then I could at least talk to you or something. And I think that would police it, enough. And the other thing is, and it's all public record, so if you have a question, it's part of the public record, and people will know. So, one thing that I will say, and many of us work in the private sector, a lot of us do, some are in the public, but you've all seen the phenomenon where somebody at a high level has just a thought, they're talking to somebody in passing, and then the underlings who are trying to look good then set up committees, and all this work happens, and before you know it, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars to ask someone's question that was a whim. Or we're setting up, and I've seen it all the time, so I just wanna make sure that whatever we do, we don't spend more money answering the question than what the value of something is. And I can tell you that when this board asks questions, it could take $1,000 of resources, $5,000 of resources to get an answer. see it all the time. The Board of Selectmen does that. We wanna study something because somebody wanted to study it. Well, guess what? $10,000 later, in terms of time spent, we get an answer, and then guess what? We didn't even use the information to make a decision. So it does happen, we just have to make sure that we guard against that type of behavior.
Agreed, and have been times in the past where some questions that did come to me from a member of the committee were not passed on. Because you guys gave me the judgment capability, and for that same reason, I didn't see where the pertinence was for an act that was ongoing.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Scott. I think I or anybody else who would be handling this is smart enough to understand if it's some question that you're not gonna bother administration with, maybe you wanna talk to the budget committee rep who's, you wanna know how many books are in the library at Glen Lake or something. If it's something that we don't need to bother the school administration with, I think I can make that call, If
Or
it's
we
some-
can ask Elizabeth during her monthly meeting with the SAU in Glen Lake if she might ask the
Right.
principal.
That kind of thing.
I mean,
So, I know a couple of times last fall, when I was working with the budget and looking at the numbers, I had some questions that, without the answers, it held me up. And I did a lot of work on it, but sometimes you get to a point, you really need to know something. I don't understand, what's this line? Most of the time, Dan had the answer. So, it's not something I'd bother the school district with.
and that's one of the times too where we can confer and see with some of the experience or some of the data, we would be able to go through it. But I'm thinking that this process will change come the fall because we're gonna be meeting more often.
Yeah.
And so, we can review it again come October. Did you have,
I just,
okay.
to the extent that we furnish information, especially stuff that doesn't necessarily come from the floor, are the answers things that then are responded to in the next meeting, as well as
All
being
questions
copied to everybody?
all questions and answers will come forward to the next public meeting.
Great.
That was the
fine.
purpose of it, so that we can try to save 4 weeks' time.
Yeah, no, just so that everybody
Yes.
at the table got
Yes.
the same, was able to share the same information.
That's irrelevant, it needs to come to the public
Right, exactly.
and be in the minutes, yes.
And I assume that'll be for both the Board of Selectmen and the school board.
No, the Board of Selectmen seems to be working the way it's working. I don't wanna change that. You're doing a great job. You're doing a fantastic job what you're doing. Do you mind doing it the way you're doing it?
No, I simply email, if I can't answer the question, I email Sue.
Right.
And she acts as our liaison
Right.
to the department heads, and she will then get the answer back to
Do you,
me.
do you mind doing it that way?
No.
I'd love to keep it that way then. I mean, everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's working, I'd like to keep that there. So there's a motion on the floor, further discussion, Jen, did you have your hand up?
Yep, I just wanted to reiterate, when this phone, because the phone issue keeps coming up, my popular phone question, it came up actually in a meeting. I don't remember, Sue, whether you were here or not, but I know it was a question that couldn't be answered at the meeting. So I then, at that moment, so just so everyone understands, I brought it to the meeting. And when it wasn't able to be answered then, I did ask for it to be, I kind of went through the process. You bring it here, if
did
you
I-
can't get your answer, then you bring it to the chair. And
Did I send it forward and?
you sent part of the question, there was a group question, and then my question wasn't included in it. But you explain why, and it's okay. So, and the other reason why I'm very supportive of this is because I think, maybe my phone question didn't spur this whole epiphany for people, but I know that there are times that there are other questions that come up that maybe the question doesn't spur an epiphany for me, but the answer certainly does, and it starts to get us kind of rolling along those lines. So I think it's really important for us to take part in that. And I wanted to see, as a part of this process, part of one of my questions is, if I hear something on the floor that pertains to the police department, do I have permission as the rep from the budget committee to, in addition to that question going through this protocol, for me to have a further conversation with the chief about that?
That is exactly why
It's your job.
you are assigned to the police, so you can have, we are hoping that when we hit the fall, that when the police bring their budget to us and start talking in their concepts and things of that, and we sit here and go sometimes, Jen? So we have it from, in deliberative stuff, because you've already asked some of those questions, you understand the concept. Being more of a, interpreter for us perhaps, don't know. Another method, we have Scott can talk about it, we can have, Chief Sullivan talk about it, we can have you talk about it, and it's three different, it's not as if you're not an advocate necessarily for that, but you are an explainer. So, yeah, and in fact, that might be one of the things that when we are talking here about police stuff, it would not necessarily be a question that Scott would take away. You could say, well, you know what, I'm meeting with Chief Sullivan, why don't I just ask him? And that could be a conversation you and Scott had. Although Scott would say, I'm sorry, I already sent it. Because he already did, except not tonight.
I will, this is charging my batteries.
Oh, all right. So
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
That's fine.
Any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Okay, ready for the question? Those in favor of that long diatribe in a synopsis, letting the questions and funneling them through Guy first, me second. All in favor, raise your hand. That's 1100, that's unanimous. We are good to go. Thank you. The only other thing that, I'm glad you're here, Philip, is,
Can I ask Jen, what was your question? Because I
Well,
think I
well-
could answer it for you.
The
It's from
phones,
last
year.
from, it was last
You
year.
can have it after the meeting.
it's probably not pertinent right
But
now.
I'm sure you could answer it, but
Oh,
at the
okay,
time,
type
it would have
it
been a great time to answer it. Would have helped you, maybe, who knows?
I'm gonna skip to the fall budget meetings, since we were talking about what we wanted to do for schedule. And Philip, we had wanted to know, and I don't know if we got an answer.
I think a retreat, we're gonna get back to you.
Okay,
So if I can email you with a response, I will.
that's fine.
If for some reason it goes beyond that,
Yeah.
it'll be the next.
Okay. And that was to see whether or not you guys wanted to get together on a date to,
Yep.
okay, Scott?
Mr. Chair, in speaking at our meeting, Sue DeRusso had mentioned that, I believe we had last week of October, or was it the last?
Okay.
The 20, the date escapes me, but it's like a 20-something. She had mentioned that if we delayed it till like first week of November, we would have all of the insurance, everything is, we get all the guaranteed rates, and it may be more beneficial, so she offered that up as.
So
a-
like November 5th?
Yeah.
If we did November 5th,
That's
what
when
that
we
would.
want school.
We have
No,
the school
and I-
down.
And I know that, that's why
9 a.m.
I'm saying it,
Yeah,
We
that,
do a whole weekend.
we would also lose 4 potential meeting dates.
Yeah.
as long as you're aware
That it would not
that
have,
it would not have a guaranteed
Okay.
maximum on the.
but we could amend that after we get, because the interest would be for us to hear, start discussing, getting more information, because I don't think you guys are gonna finalize it until
No.
November.
I don't think it's
and-
that big of a deal personally, because
Okay.
we've done this before where we didn't have the rate, we put in, say, 15% or 10%, and then we amended it up or down,
Right.
2 or 3 weeks later. I don't think it's that big of a
I-
deal.
No, it
I'd
isn't.
like to continue that, the dates that we had talked about were, okay, do you have your dates there? I'm gonna read them off to you. Okay, we talked about, Saturday, October 22nd with the selectmen, right?
9 a.m.
I believe so, yes. And then we had Tuesday and Thursday, the 25th and 27th. Then Tuesday, Thursday, the 1st and the 3rd. Then, we're gonna see if the school board can come on November 5th, or be part, we'll find out a little later. Then we have Tuesday, Thursday, November 8th and 10th, Tuesday, Thursday, the 15th and 17th. Then we skip the Thanksgiving week, and we come back to Tuesday, Thursday, November 29 and December 1st, and then Tuesday, Thursday, December 6th and December 8th. Then we reserved the rest of December to, if we had to. We would schedule it, our monthly meeting would happen, and that would be what we decided was gonna be what day it was gonna be for our monthly meeting, and whether we've done or not. Is that still good for everybody? That's good. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send this officially over to the town, and they're gonna schedule whatever rooms they can for us, and post it in the calendar.
We just don't know about the school yet, though, right?
We have not confirmed the school, and Scott You guys gonna meet to confirm another date with us, or is it pretty well confirmed?
What? This?
October
October 22nd.
22nd.
It's done, yeah.
It's done, okay.
It's just a matter of getting the school, make sure that the
Okay.
information center is.
Okay. Thank
There was
you.
discussion last meeting about using the step room
Yes.
at the high school, and that's fine. Just have to get the building usage forms in.
Okay, and was that for the selectmen too? Because
I
you
don't
said
know.
this room was
Yeah.
kinda small.
Yeah, I think it should be both.
Okay, no, that'd be great.
I
I
can't
mean,
fill
is
out
that
those
something that the selectmen and the school board would fill out, or is that gonna be a
Uh,
budget committee meeting,
Or
or?
fill out like 18 permits
It's a
for a
build,
block party. I'm
it's
not fine.
just a formality.
I got the proof right here.
I mean, it's not like we get,
Typically, it's whoever is requesting the use of the room.
Okay, do you now,
it'll be the town for both
in,
presentations.
in the,
Yes.
okay, which is possible, in the past, it was the selectmen who held the meeting and invited the budget committee. I believe last year, 2 years ago, the school board held the meeting and invited the budget committee. Last year, the budget committee held the meeting and invited the school board for just a presentation. I don't think the school board came, but there's been times where we've met together, and so,
We were here last October
yes,
for a presentation
right,
on a Saturday.
to
at
the budget
invitation
committee.
of the budget committee.
Right, and the budget committee had the scribe, and it was a budget committee meeting. The question I'm asking is, in your talking at the retreat, could you let me know if you believe that would be a budget committee meeting or a school board meeting? It depends on whose title it is and who needs to fill out the paperwork.
Post.
I'm assuming we're responding to an invitation on the fifth, so.
Okay,
if-
then it'll be a budget committee meeting.
yeah,
For both.
that's-
Can I get, can you help me get whatever request forms we need?
Sure.
Sure we can. You don't need them right now, right?
Well, the sooner the
Might as well-
better.
might as well get it
Email.
done.
Because, yeah, I
It's
mean,
not like we have people
I'm gonna
standing in
wait-
line to use the step room on a Saturday.
Actually, it's part of the school board policies. It is.
to,
Jen's a big
The
policy
request
girl.
form is part of the school board.
I figured so.
I think I have it in a PDF, so.
and what's there, what's available, what we need to bring, whether, you know,
Throw one of those suckers in.
I just don't wanna lose track of it. Okay, so we're good with that. Did you guys got the school and town financials for March? You saw the school board, school assigned members should have
You
seen
said March,
a,
but you meant April, I'm assuming?
say again,
You said March, but you meant April?
Are we in May now?
Yes.
I don't think we've gotten the April ones.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, we
We
did.
got them for
you
school, but I
got-
don't think we got them for town.
Yeah, you got it for town.
Yeah, we did.
Got them for town,
Just
but I don't remember
recently.
seeing them for school.
Yeah, it came out like
Got 'em
on
a long time
April,
ago.
That's been there
May
for a week and a half.
1st, May 2nd, it
Yeah.
was,
Oh, I missed the email then, okay.
okay, if I need to resend it, I
Just for the
can.
record.
We got the report that organized it mostly by function, if you saw it. So it gives you, for instance, Lisa,
Yes.
it gives you the 1100 to 1199 series kinda together. So you'll see it by school.
Yeah, I think I have it.
Yeah, and it gives you a better understanding of where all that is on closer to 1, 2, 3, 4 sheets of paper together. So look,
so it's still, go ahead.
no, please ask.
So it's still your vision or thought?
I'm not giving up on it yet.
Okay, but you'll just have to define it a skosh for me, so I know what.
With these
you're looking for.
reports, it makes it a little easier. If you look at, let's say 000 and you look at 1100,
Yeah,
are there any expenses there? Yes, the answer is yes.
Yes,
If
yeah.
you look at the first line,
you're
there's a,
throwing me a softball here,
yes,
yeah.
there's a 3-digit number there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the 3, I'm doing this from memory.
You mean the account number?
The account number.
Yeah.
Now, each one of the schools may have that same account number.
Right.
They're not all together, but they're in pretty close.
Right,
If you look at that and you add those together, even mentally, and you can see how that's doing versus the budget.
okay,
And as we get closer, you're gonna find some might be overexpended or underexpended, and that's okay. But that gives you an idea of what the thought process was on how they were gonna spend the money versus what they ended up needing to do. And how that reflects when the budget gets created for the next budget season.
Okay, I mean, to me, it would
Yeah.
give me an idea that something happened, but I don't know
Yes.
what the thought process is myself, personally, without
Mhm.
speaking to somebody else, honestly.
Right, and what you could do.
It might prompt questions, if that's what you mean.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
If you can help by prompting questions, we
Okay,
can
yeah.
discuss those at this meeting. And then we could say
Funnel
if,
them through Guy?
say again?
Funnel the questions through Guy?
Not really, because I don't think they would go out, at this point, they wouldn't go
didn't answer
to
that
to
one.
Ray at this point. I think we would discuss them
Okay.
here. Because, and then we will talk about, those kind of questions would be to this group, not to.
Yeah, but most of these are teacher salary and benefits. I
That's
mean,
all what it is. The
Okay,
1,100 to
so-
the 1199 is regular education.
Right, but
So the
it's-
first 100, and so there are other expenses in there. So the
Mm-hmm.
ones that have for salaries might not mean a whole lot.
Right,
But if you look at the other ones there, some are furniture, might
right.
be furniture. I'm not sure what's in there.
Okay, so
But if you look
whatever
at,
questions I get from looking at this,
Yeah.
then bring them to the committee.
Right.
Okay, I get
it's
it.
similar to, if we look at Checker, you've got the 2300 series. So it's same kind of thing, and John, you've got the 2000 series. And then Ivan and Elizabeth have the other ones, but it's an idea trying to get a better handle so that we can understand the entire budget in the groupings for which it's budgeted. I thought that might, trying to make it a little more helpful. You also got a revenue, report that was dated April 5. I think I said that to you, so, it gets, they haven't, there was an expectation of $8.1 million yet to come in. There's a projection of 33 million and 25 million came in. I'm not sure what it is as of now, but this is what it was when I sent that out a month or so ago. Any questions on that? We can segue into the town reports. You have anything on fire, Bill?
No, I do not.
John, anything on library?
Went to the Board of Trustees last month. At the end of the month, they're 30% through their budget, which is normal. They're tracking normal. Going to the Board of, or the trustee meeting next week. The only item, and I guess I want to look up more on my notes, the only item maybe to mention is CIP planning for the library. I think what they're doing is they had about 3.6 million planned for the 2015 year of CIP, and I think they're bumping that back to 2016. Includes the expansion of the parking lot and the renovation of the library. If I'm reading my notes correctly, I'm pretty sure that's what they're doing. I'm gonna clarify though and make sure.
Okay. Questions for John on the library? Anything extra, Scott? Steve, anything on Parks and Rec?
Yeah, I met with Rick Wilhelmy and visited all the sites, all the pool areas and all the different lands that are available for future parks and so on. And I gotta say, these pools, they're a mess. I don't know if any of you have been out there to visit these sites, but they need a lot of work, and I can guarantee if it was a private business running these things, they'd have been fired. It's pretty bad. But I'll be working with Rick hand in hand. He gives me a great rundown of all his expenses, and we'll work it out.
So, go ahead, Scott.
Just for the record, both pools are slated to start repairs, I think, this month.
Yep.
With a completion, I think Rick said he thought the first week of June. That's what I thought he said.
Okay.
So, if you recall, last year, we reallocated funds because they were in such
6,000
horrible
gallons
shape.
a
Yeah,
day or something, and
so,
I think the pay-to-play is a great idea. Pay to stay at the day camps is a great idea as well. We gotta raise some revenue, gotta raise some money there.
80 to 100 kids at a camp paid for by the taxpayers. It's taking its toll.
Questions for Steve on, Jen?
I have a question, Steve, on the day camps. Do we know how enrollment is going for that? Because it is the first year, it's,
Rick, I did ask him. He said it's down to half of what it used to be because they are charging. I don't know the number that they're charging. Is it $50 a week? I think he said 50 or 55, yeah. How about the sports? Do we know what they're charging?
Most of them are $20, $20 to $50 for most of the sports. I will say, it's very important that this gets on the record here. For those families that may have a financial hardship, they are to contact the director, because they do have a policy in place to address families who do have financial hardships, whether that be, and what they're working with is actually, they're working with the schools to a degree in terms of if there are families that are on free or reduced lunch, the director has authority to handle those situations on his own. The commission has given that, but we wanted to make crystal clear that if there were families or kids who didn't have the economic means, that they would not be turned away. So there is a safety net there, and the vast majority of the programs are, like I said, $20 to $50 to participate. So it's pretty reasonably priced. And then the day camp is $50 a week, which is also very reasonably priced when you take a look at what surrounding communities are charging. So.
Yeah.
Further questions?
There's no out-of-town, but is there differentiation
Yes,
for out-of-town versus
there
in-town?
are out-of-town kids do play in our programs, but they pay at a higher rate.
Not much higher.
$10 higher, right. But if it's something that's 20 and they're paying 30, that's 33% more, so, but they are paying more.
Further?
Just curious, not that, I thought that anybody here would have any input on it, but how are these prices set? What are they?
The,
Or do you know?
I've been on the Parks and Rec Commission as the selectman's rep for the last couple of meetings. I can tell you that in terms of looking at surrounding communities, our prices right now are lower than surrounding communities. But since this is brand new, the commission, their desire was not to just start and go with a price that may have priced them out of the mark. So they want to do it in a transitional type way. So they're going to revisit the fees, but since it's the first year, they wanted to start off, I guess, in a more modest and incremental fashion. Just, to put it mildly, that's what they wanted to do.
So an idea that Rick and I talked about was a way to raise money is to hold some sort of clinics, soccer clinics, baseball clinics. I got contacts in professional baseball that I'm sure I could get some named people here that can run some clinics, and we can charge these kids and raise some money that way as well.
Further questions for Steve on the Parks and Rec budget?
I did have a couple more on Parks and Rec, just so you're aware. The Board of Selectmen is gonna start an ad hoc committee, which will take a look at the land formerly the Barnard land, which the town purchased a year ago, a little more than that. And the Parks and Rec Commission will take the lead on that. So the first process was to ask all of our department heads what uses that they might have for that property. There really weren't any, except for mostly Parks and Recreation. What impacts it might have to DPW and/or police department. We ruled out a future municipal site for a central fire station, so that's off the table. So the Board of Selectmen, the only thing that we asked that this committee take a look at is we want them to come up with plans for the future development of that site as a parks facility, setting aside future space for future municipal use. So just like Cemetery Field, where the kids practice on that, we would set aside a certain segment of that for the possibility of a future building 25 years from now, just to play it safe, But that's how that'll occur within the next couple of months. And I'm sure we'll have a member on this committee will be asked to serve on that. So Steve, if that's something that you want to partake in, it might be really good due to your background.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the goal is to have a plan by the end of the year. And to really to talk, how is this site gonna be used? Because as you recall, we're excavating materials out.
Yep.
And we need to do that incrementally, and as we excavate, and now we have a hole, we now make the field. And we go on to the next one, but it has to be kind of planned out.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when you drive in there? For me, when I drove in there, it was a motocross park. You know what I mean?
I don't wanna get too far, but that.
No, I know, I'm dreaming, I
That's,
know.
But that, no, I'm talking about
Nightmare.
the committee here, but which is, I mean, that would be, appropriations and stuff. Where's the access from which road?
There are several access points, but primarily it would be through the DPW. And it's also, there was a road that DPW built to excavate the sand, so there's a gate that's right next to DPW. There is also the potential of future access points, Henry Bridge, if we're able to secure an easement from an abutter,
Okay.
So there are currently 2 access points in and out, DPW and the other dirt road, with the potential of a third if we get an easement.
Any other questions on that? Let me go to Jen in, Police Department.
Been emailing with the chief just to kind of catch up with him and see if there are any outstanding issues, and just to kind of see, one of the questions that came up at our last meeting was regarding upcoming special details and any unexpected funds that were going to be needed from that. And the political debates are going to be starting sooner than expected, and so there is concern on the chief's part for that, as well as the 250th celebration, because the revolving account was not approved, and so there's limited funds in the special detail account, so there's some anticipated issues there. I asked specifically about the traffic, some of the new traffic challenges that we have, just with all of the public works projects coming up, which I'm sure you're gonna be talking about, Guy. And he stated that those were not unanticipated, and so, as they were part of multi-year projects. The only other main concern he had, or immediate issue, was we are underfunded in fuel, propane, retirement, and workman's comp in particular is underfunded by $5,000.
Let me ask Scott the question on workers' comp. Is that systemic throughout the time? What happened?
I think it was they changed the rating. I think that's what Sue told us, so it was under
yeah.
budgeted, but in most of our departments.
We all thought that was too good of a price, huh? And they can do that. Bill? John?
Supposedly they made a mistake. It was like, Primex, I think was the one.
Yeah, well, if they make a mistake, shouldn't they suck up to it?
Amen, brother. Amen.
John? You have a question for?
Who is the carrier for workers' comp? I mean, is it through LGC?
No, I think you just said Primex,
I think it was Primex.
Or somebody.
I know that there was an error in the calculation.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure if it was us or them, but I know there was an error. I don't think it's something that is kind of made out to be like, oh my God, I don't think it's that big in the grand scheme of things.
What is our exposure to losing the capability of having enough funds for the officers who are currently on staff because of projects in the 250th and the presidential debates? Do you have any idea?
I do not know, but I'm more than happy to bring the question back.
Can you rephrase the question?
I can rephrase it by saying the police department's budget, if I recollect, was 92%. It was a very high number, personnel, salaries, all those kind of things. And if we have to provide security for the presidential debates and the 250 within the constraints of the appropriation that was handed down to them, they can't go over that appropriation, which means if they do go over the appropriation, that means they have to not spend something else. And when you only have that much, how does that affect that other?
The board, through communications with you, if we got to that point,
Yep.
could come before you and say, we need to transfer monies from another department to police. So
Okay.
if we had to do that,
Right.
we will. We'll ask the chief to manage to it. One things that we that are unknowns at this point is staffing, so, I can tell you that there is some concern that we, due to changes in possible retirement system, that we may lose police officers who, may retire early. So, if that were to occur, you might have a 2 or 3 month window where you're looking to hire an officer and you're saving salary, and it might compensate for some of these things. So, it's always a very fluid process with the budget. I would say, don't be alarmed right now. I think we'll be okay. If we're not okay, then we're gonna come back to you and say, for these reasons, which some of you just mentioned, we may have to do like an interdepartmental type transfer, and, we'll let you know that.
I have a follow-on question from yours,
Right.
cause, and it's to Jen or to you, and that is, especially presidential, forget about the 250th anniversary thing, that's kind of in the family, but this presidential stuff, what's to prohibit us from just, charging for these events?
And we do
Charging-
charge.
We do.
We do charge. But they pay 30 days. What happens is, we have to gross appropriate, which means we have to have the money allowable to expense, even though the revenue comes in to cover it. When you run out of
Okay,
that,
so it's just the delta then.
That was one of the reasons for that special account,
Okay.
was that it's like cash in, cash out, and as John was just saying, you could, you technically, you might not get the money for 30 or 60 days, and in that meantime,
Okay.
that fund kinda cashes out the police officer who did the detail. So that was one of the reasons for it, but
And is it also the case that we're only permitted by law to charge for actual expense?
yeah, I mean, technically, yeah, you can charge administrative costs, and it is you just can't charge whatever you want. And the other, on the flip side, we will do what we have to do. There are other agencies around Goffstown that if we were in a position where we could not provide the detail, then a surrounding community is gonna provide the detail. I mean, you've been to other communities where it is not always that local
Right.
municipality who's doing the detail.
Right.
Sometimes they don't have enough staffing, so it's a neighboring town that does a detail.
Okay.
or the sheriff
Or
department.
sheriff's department, right.
Okay. Further questions for police? Segue into, Public Works guy.
Public Works, I had coffee with Carl earlier this week, just a few quick things. According to him, the projects in Bernardville and the Rotary, the roundabout are proceeding on schedule. I did note something, and I don't know if anybody else noticed it, in the Public Works Expense Fund 10, that the fuel line is, the vehicle fuel, not diesel fuel, is already way over expended. And I asked Carl about it, budgeted at 9,300, and we've already spent 15,000. However, he explained that the fuel that's used not only by Public Works, but all the departments in town, is purchased by Public Works. And they subsequently invoice the other departments down the road, and it just happened that we just got a big load of fuel, and that's why that's so far overexpended. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I'm just gonna give you a quick overview of it, and with your permission, I'm gonna defer to Scott on this. There's been a failure along the rail trail behind the county farm on the eastern end of it. Apparently, I'm sure, Scott, you can give, I don't remember all the details to it, I watched the meeting that you guys had. They're bringing in an engineering firm to take a look and see what that's gonna run. Carl's guess, off the top of his head, including the cost of the engineering firm, he's crossing his fingers at around 80 grand. And I think you guys discussed that, I guess the cost of that would come out of the road plan. Is that would be done to repair that? Because there's a culvert there too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated because we're trying to figure out what the issue is. It's also, potential county is involved in it as well. There could be easier fixes, but there was a washout. And I think what we chatted about was, let's see what the deal is with, by hiring an engineer, and then from there, depending on what the cost is, we talked about, can this wait? Is it an imminent failure of another problem where there's a safety issue, or can we just budget for it next year? So that's kind of where.
Okay. Now, that thing's cordoned off right now, right?
Yes, yep.
Can they still get by it?
Yes.
Okay.
Is this at one of those real high points?
Yep.
Cause 80 grand
And
seems
we'd
awful steep.
we'd really like for you to, maybe bike there this weekend if you could.
Oh,
With shovel.
Well,
I'll
it's-
go
just
there
bring-
with, how if I bring my 4-year-old?
Just bring your
Would that be
shovel,
good?
just bring your shovel.
A few years ago, when we were talking about rail trail, they were discussing that the rail trail isn't just this 10 or 12-foot wide section, it's primarily almost 50 feet wide, from what I've been told. Is that,
Yeah, it depends upon the spots, but.
depends where it is, but it could be potentially very wide, so there could be room to get around it.
On the flip side, the positive news about the rail trails has been a lot of work done from the Manchester side.
Mhm.
I don't know if everybody's been down there. I would encourage you that since the weather is getting a lot nicer, take a walk or a bike ride along the rail trail. It's a phenomenal experience, and they've done a lot of work by Surratt Field. I don't know if you saw that, Steve, but they've done, there's a beautiful vista now right by Surratt Field that overlooks Namaski Lake, the river there. It's really nice. So take a look. Actually it faces your house, I think.
I was just gonna say that.
I'm a little higher up the
Little higher,
river,
yeah.
but, yeah. It'd be,
And is that Manchester did that?
No, we did it.
well, they did it from up there, that's on the Manchester-Goffstown line, but you can look over. Manchester is still trying to plan on connecting
Yeah.
to us at that point,
Yep,
but
and, they're looking, and that is gonna happen most likely next summer. They're in their engineering, and while we're
So
on
you
that
have
rail
to-
trail subject, we put out, we got a grant, a transportation enhancement grant, and that is going out. The firm, VHB was hired, and they're gonna come up with the scope of work and the cost to do the improvements on that grant.
there's the legal services line guy.
Yeah, I saw that. Too late to ask him about it. I didn't see that
You
until
know,
afterwards.
Scott, I mean, it was budgeted at 3, and we spent over 7,300 so far through April. Any idea what legal services? I mean, something that you can tell us?
It was 2,000 just this period. So I'm just wondering,
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be contract negotiations, because we haven't had any, but maybe the bills came in for some of that.
From last year, hanging over?
No,
Wouldn't we have
no,
encumbered it, or?
No, I can't imagine it would be that. It must be something else.
Okay, that'd be an outstanding question.
I will say this, that, I can't talk about it, well, we have consulted an attorney with some of our projects, which we had to deal with.
Okay.
So and there was a lot of consultation with our attorney about some of our projects. So that could very well be.
Okay.
comes out of
I know
DPW's legal instead of the town's, or,
it's very possible. And that would be my first guess, but if you want me to check into that for you? Or you want to contact Carl
Well,
yourself?
either that, or that's something, I mean,
I'm
it's up to you guys.
liaison to DPW anyways. I'll find out and I'll
Okay.
shoot
I
an
asked the
email to
question,
everybody.
and we're good.
Other than that, the only other thing is that the cost of the engineering is gonna come out of the consulting line. I hope they're inexpensive, there's only 400, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, how much is left in there? $800. And like I said, I presume if you do it at all this year, would be road plan money, or you don't think that's likely?
I don't think that's likely.
Okay.
I don't know. I didn't sense there was enough support for that one, but
Yeah, I
could
didn't
be
either
wrong.
watching the meeting. Okay, and other than that, solid waste and cemetery and public works are all running below 33%, so they're tracking fine.
I have another question for you on the, because the early 2011 winter, rather than the late 2011 winter is there, and I'm looking at the things like salt and overtime and plowing and that thing, how's he feel that the balance is in the account? Is that gonna,
He thinks
enough
that,
to-
that even with the April 5 snowstorm, that he's ahead of it on the salt.
Sorry about that. That was my iTunes just went on. I was gonna play that roundabout song for you at the end of the meeting, but
we wanted the traffic circle song, I think. Further questions for Public Works? Yeah, Mr. John?
Guy, I was wondering if you could get the number, I know the Public Works was down in Litchfield Park on the Rails to Trails for about a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize they were also over to, Surratt Field, over that area. I was wondering if you could get a number of, what has been spent on Rails to Trails for man hours and fuel and,
By DPW.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm just curious on that number. This year. this year alone.
Yeah, I'm kinda curious myself now that you bring it up.
Further questions for, DPW? Do you have anything for administration you could share on any of the town hall offices in Philip's absence?
That's it.
Any questions, anybody?
I'm trying to think of things that are going on.
Well, how's Dawn doing? I mean, we're,
Oh, I have something to share with you.
okay, you wanna defer?
I happened to be at Town Hall Monday and was introduced to him, and he's very happy to come down here anytime we have any questions. He's very, very looking forward to working with us, basically was the long message, or that's a short version of the long message, but nice guy, and anything we need to know, get a hold of him.
He's very knowledgeable.
And who's this?
Don Barrow is the new finance director.
And he took over for Janice.
Yeah, Don was the Assistant Director of Municipal Services for the State of New Hampshire Department of Revenue for many, many years. So he should know how to fill in those forms, because he may have been one who was the
Made 'em up.
culprit and made them up. Okay. Town clerk, elections, finance, administration, tax collection, revaluation of property, infotech, PEG TV, any questions?
On the G, there will be there's a committee that's been appointed to renegotiate our cable franchise agreement. And it's a small group of people. It's our IT director, Sue DeRusso, Derek, and Dick Gagnon, and there's a couple of other people. And they're the ones who determine, when if you have Comcast, what that franchise fee is, and that also generates revenue for the town. So they'll probably have something in place by the end of the year as well.
Okay. Cool. Let's segue down to school reports. Ivan's not here. Hey, John, you want to talk about Mountain View and your May 2nd meeting
All right,
in any order you wish?
all right, well, Mountain View, there's nothing to report. I haven't met with them.
Okay.
I guess at some point I do need to give them a call. And then on the school meeting that I went to, it went fairly well. The total manifest on the ANF was 1,323,169, and what that detailed was payroll, taxes, and benefits. The 4/21 payroll. All right.
About 6.
Is 491,483. That's 491,483. The taxes on that were 152,537. Benefits, 449,706. And that came out to 1,000,000, almost 100,000. And then it went to the A and P activity, which is the special ed. The bus is the provider, is the bus company. They came in at 53,000, almost $100. The monitors for the buses were $3,353. I guess that's the people that sit there and, keep control of the kids. If I understood right. And then is it Primed Education Services? Am I saying that right?
I don't know.
Pyramid Education Services, which is $8,248.
It's a placement. Out of district.
Okay. Out-of-district placement, so that would
Oh,
be...
I think there's a
That's right.
child down in Massachusetts that we send down, and I think that's probably part of that. And then they go to the general expenses, the Honeywell, which is, if I remember right, that's to do with the
Energy efficiencies.
energy efficiency, yeah. That month was 11,230. Icon was 7,600, and then PSNH for the power is 11,354. And the Senate is trying to kill our repeal of the Reggie, which will keep our power bills down. There is an amendment, so I guess it's gonna go to conference, up to the State House.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about what,
I haven't seen the
okay.
the
there's some-
amendment, but I
there's
know
some
the
plan-
amendment's not good, from what I understand.
And that would not keep the power rates down for regulations or something, and we're looking,
Yeah, Reggie is, if I understand it right, when I voted on it, they said, it just puts a lot of restrictions on power companies, and like, if you burn coal, then you gotta pay an extra $20 to burn that coal. If
Oh.
you burn something else, then you gotta pay extra for that.
so that means the prices would go up.
Yes, yeah, and if we repeal it, which that's what the House wanted, but the Senate saw something different, then it would eliminate all that. And then at the school board meeting, there was quite a bit of information. I'll go down as quick as I can. They passed out the medical, dental, and vision forms for people to sign up, because this is the time of year to sign up. The GTV lease is up. I guess they're looking at a 5-year lease.
Yeah, and if I could,
Possible. Oh, okay.
on, as far as the health insurance offered to school board members, they pay 100% of it.
Yes.
They do, yes.
That, I wanted to keep that
Yeah.
with the same comment.
Okay, yes, they do. They have to pay 100%.
Okay.
The GTV, their current contract ends this year, and they're looking for a 5-year lease.
This is for the space in the schools?
Yes. Yeah,
Do you know what they were paying before?
I don't think it was said
Okay.
at the meeting, so.
If it'll help, there is no payment.
Yeah.
It's an agreement that allows them to use the space, and a fairly extensive agreement that
The
allows
school
the school
to use the
services
facilities.
of GTV, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds like a good,
Yeah,
Good
well, it
bar.
seemed like the school was very happy with
Sure.
the agreement.
okay.
The school board.
Sure.
And they wanted to renew it. They
Okay.
were very happy with the services they're getting. Yeah, it was brought up that the administration staff gave up some raises in order to help the budget, because I think that should be mentioned. Stacy Buckley is gonna go to the planning board. She's concerned about the noise, possibly if this goes through, Burger King is gonna be torn down and Family Dollar is gonna go up. A store, and she's just concerned with the noise for the Bartlett School.
And the jackhammering potentially shaking the school.
Yeah.
During school hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
That could be a distraction.
Well, when the little strip
Next
mall
door,
next
yeah.
door was built, when
Right.
they put the pile
Did
pile
you,
driver there,
Yeah.
did you feel it at
People
your
were-
house?
people were getting motion sickness in Bartlett.
Oh, it's weird.
I mean, it's that close,
Wow,
you know?
yeah.
So certain things will have to be done at night.
And then also, Stacy Buckley is gonna speak with Chief Sullivan. They're gonna have a couple public hearings about the Glen Lake parking, at the public parking, it's a public, school parking lot, during the summer, and I think it's an issue with, people parking there from out of town and going over using the lake.
I think that's in conjunction, and Scott can speak to this. You had your public hearing earlier this week, and you have
Or
another
two.
one
Yeah.
coming up.
Okay.
Is there gonna be from what I understand, Guy may have told me there's gonna be a co-agreement that goes together? The ordinance and the school wanna match it?
Yeah, I mean, it's important that they are meshed well together for
Okay.
enforcement purposes.
Okay.
But one is town-owned land, which we have an ordinance, and then the other one is a school district policy.
Policy, right?
Okay.
So, the chief worked with both the Board of Selectmen and the school board to make sure that they meshed together. One of the concerns that is out there is the notion of school use of the property, to say during, the months of May. So if you had an ordinance where you can't park, but then you have kids, or say summer school or other issues, we have to try to craft something that allows for visitors or teachers who may not be Goffstown residents, that they can have a sticker or temporary passes or things of that nature, so that they don't get ticketed if there is a resident-only parking at the Glen Lake School. So, for the summer.
Right.
So if you started, let's say, May 15th to say September 15th or October 15th, you have those periods where you might have grandparents who might pick up their kids at the school, or there might be some sort of a function there. Police were to go by, if they didn't have that sticker, then they could technically issue them a summons. So that has to get kind of ironed out, how to figure that out.
We don't see much of a budget appropriation impact at all. Because, in fact, it might be positive where if a cruiser were to divert through the parking lot, that it's more of a positive.
Well, the only thing there, parking violations are monies that stay within the town. Whereas moving violations go to the state, so.
Okay.
Is the school board holding a separate public hearing?
I don't think
Oh,
they
you're
have
not,
to.
okay.
They have what's called
We
a
have
reading of a
policies.
policy. So
Right.
they read that policy twice in the same thing. They kind of do that with I'm not speaking for you, but two intervals of time.
Right.
They
We
do a
had our first
read
reading
and then
at
a
this last
second read.
meeting.
So you've already had them?
We've had the first reading.
It's,
Okay.
it's
We-
not
We need another 30 days before we can approve it.
My question is because as you know, I addressed the Board of Selectmen about it on Monday, and I had made a suggestion on some changes. Do I need to go and do the same thing with the school? Because they're mentioned in the ordinance.
It would help, in my
Okay.
opinion, because they should know that there was a desire to start this thing in May, not in June.
Okay.
Because they have, I'm just saying, in terms of a public comment, that's something that they should know about.
Okay.
Is that a public comment process, Suzanne, or is that a self-contained?
Quite honestly, I don't think we've ever had anybody come and comment on a policy.
Well, I'd like to.
Is that
I don't know if our
available for the
policy,
public input,
I don't know if our policy,
or is it just part of a potential
Phil, do you
public
remember if there's a
comment at the
specific
beginning of
date
the-
in the policy?
I
Wait a
no,
minute.
I don't remember that. Would you let us know so that,
Yes, there is one. It says from June 15th to Labor Day.
and you wanted to, and your concern in the meeting was to back that up to May 15th?
May 15th to September 15th.
And the rationale behind that was that you have major holidays there, so you're gonna have one major holiday, Memorial Day, where it's okay to do it.
Yeah.
But then the other 2 or 3, you can't, so.
Let's solve this. Is that something that the chief was in favor of?
I got the sense that the Board of Selectmen was in favor
I
of it.
got that sense
Yeah.
too.
All right, then at our next read, that's something that I will bring up as something that
So you don't have to go
was
there.
part of a dialogue.
Okay. All right,
So-
great.
So whether or not, I don't, to be perfectly honest, I think, I've never seen anybody ask for a public comment on a policy before, but we'll make sure it gets aired.
You
All
could
right,
make the
thank you.
history books.
When is it anyway? You're airing your,
It'll be handled in the next meeting.
It's
You do it in one meeting,
during the meeting.
Do it, and then you follow second read in the next meeting.
We don't have to have a public hearing for
Right.
policies, so
Okay.
just do it during regular meetings.
I just didn't mean to divert everybody on
No,
that. but-
it's, I always try to bring it in around appropriations and revenue and the impact on budgets. John?
And then also, the out-of-towners can park there to use the playground. There was talk of that, and I don't know if that's been changed or not, but not the beach. So they can use the playground, but not the beach.
How do you?
So I don't know.
Would we let,
No, I
That
don't,
was
Yeah,
brought
how do you
up,
police
but
that?
I don't know if that's been changed or not, but at the meeting, that's what
Okay,
was brought up.
there was some discussion
Yes,
surrounding that.
yeah.
That's a tough one to police.
Yes. And then, they're working on their list of CIP items, and the school board should have what they want/need by the next meeting, which is May 16th. There was a little bit of talk of renovations in the 2012-13 year for $4.2 million for the Bartlett School. They also talked about replacing a fuel tank at Maple Ave. And there was very small talk about natural gas line, possibly
Yes.
for Maple Ave.
Maple Ave.
Yeah.
I wonder what it would cost to have
Yeah.
them dig up the street and just bring it in.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at what the
It's
tank's
not
gonna
that-
cost us, and then the savings over the fuel, because natural gas is pretty cheap.
But
I don't believe there's a
other
line.
residents
There's
that
a
want it
natural
too.
gas line.
I think it's by the library.
Does it go as far as the
It's
library?
what,
Yeah.
2 blocks to get it to the school, and it almost seems it'd be a payback, like the Honeywell thing, to get it gassed in.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
It seems to make sense to me.
And then also, they're looking.
Before you go, because I wanted to stay with the 4.2 million for Bartlett in the 2012-2013.
Yep.
Do you remember again when we are
August
making
of
the
this,
last payment? on-
August this year.
August this year, okay. Thank you.
They're looking to re-roof, Mountain View Middle School in the 13-14 year. That's what they're looking at, for proposed, Goffstown
Was there a number attached
There,
to it over?
there was no number at that,
Okay.
that I remember hearing.
Alright.
Goffstown High School, we're looking at the new track, which has been brought up in the past, of 2.25 million. And that replaces the track that's, well, if I point right, over to Barnard. But it also moves the bleachers, lighting, and what they're thinking would happen is that it would be bonded with the elementary school. And then that way it's all one bond. They're also looking at $250,000 for new seating in the auditorium and a sound system. They currently have 2 storage sheds. They would, I guess there's a cement pad out on the back side of the auditorium, and they would love to have a shed built. This wasn't said at the meeting, but in my brain, I'm thinking, why can't we just get some volunteers and build a damn shed there? But, because that's what I'm thinking, I think they could get some of the lumber donated and et cetera, and presto, we have a shed and we aren't paying for these storage units. And hopefully we could build it look nice. They are pushing the new pickup to 2014. The old truck is 10 years old and has 47,000 miles on it, and the new truck is approximately $35,000. Okay, the fuel tank I already said. What they're looking at also is 9.5 million for renovations to Maple Ave. They would probably take a 20-year bond at 5%. When they mentioned the 5%, I mentioned, I think this was at the A&F when they talked about the 5%. I said, didn't you just refinance, which they did, and I think they came in at 3.4% refinancing, and it's saving us quite a bit of money per year for this bond that we currently have. But they're just saying that 5% is average. But, I'm hoping that we could get another 3.4 if we're gonna do it.
What year are they proposing for that?
I think that would fall into the 12-13 or the 13-14 year for all of these renovations that they want, and also the track. That was the years that kept bouncing around, was 2012, 13, and 13 and 14, and that's it.
Just to add to what you said, I think you probably covered fairly just about everything that was on CIP. The school board is gonna include a discussion of CIP, in its retreat that's coming up. And one of the things that we have to make decisions on is, as we look at the landscape, what are the things that it makes sense to shoot for and when? Because right now, because things have been moved around that haven't been done, and I suspect this is true on every CIP, they all sort of band together and look like they're all gonna occur at the same time, which is unrealistic for the community. So one of our efforts in looking at CIP, now that we've gotten an education on what is on there, is where things are going to go, and in what years, and how it makes sense to try to accomplish a bunch of capital projects, and which ones are the greatest priorities. But right now, they're all sort of lumped together, as though they're all gonna occur in sort of 2012, 2013, and go forward from there, which won't be the presentation that you eventually see.
Further questions on the meeting of May 2? Okay, thanks, John.
Yep, thank you. And thank you, Sue, for having the paper.
Lisa, you wanna talk about Bartlett?
Yeah, I did meet with David Bosquet again on Monday. He's at the end of his budget. So, yeah, so I kind of pulled out things, I pulled out line items where there was money left, which there wasn't much, but I don't know if you want me to go through line by line, I'll just tell you what I found here. They had money left over, in lines 642, electronic information. There's about $1,300 left in that, and he will be getting laminating supplies for that. In their guidance, in function under guidance, there was money for testing, about $93, and that was gonna be used for first graders being tested this week. Health services, general supplies, they need annual maintenance on a audiometer for hearing, and that was about $218. Replacement furniture was really one of the larger things I found. It was $812.57. And he's looking to buy a fireproof filing cabinet for special education files.
Yeah.
And 3 new whiteboards, and he actually had shown me some of the pricing he had done for that, and he couldn't get it for that amount, so he's trying to do that by the end of the month. And then also $865.90 for, in the classrooms now, they have an amplified sound system. And there were repairs that needed to be done in 3 of those classrooms. I actually saw the devices in his office that he needs to get fixed. And as he walked me out, we noticed the former Burger King across the way, and we noticed how beautiful the shrubs were. So I kind of did some research and found who the owner was. And David Rose, our town planner, am I getting his name right? Not David, Brian Rose. I contacted him, and he was drafting a letter, he happened to be, to the new owners. It is the Family Dollar store, asking them if they're gonna bulldoze, could we maybe have the shrubs for Bartlett? And Bartlett volunteers will go and get them. Yeah. So. No, we're asking permission,
Need to walk them across the street and
Right.
Show up with our shovel.
So I thought that was pretty cool that we're gonna.
and
do
there
that.
is a lined crosswalk there
Right.
to haul them
Well
over.
said, yeah.
Did they say yes?
He just sent the letter, what day are we on now, Wednesday? This all happened on Tuesday, yesterday. So, we'll see. And there is a public hearing, Thursday here. I wanna say it's either 6, I wrote down 6 o'clock, on that construction. So if people wanted to come to that, tomorrow.
Is that the planning board?
Here?
She said, I talked to, they said town hall. I talked to someone else whose name
Usually
I
the
can't
planning
remember.
board, I think that they go before, or that's, would be, today's the 2nd, Thursday, so it could be. I don't know.
2nd and 4th is when they meet.
It is 2nd, 4th. Tomorrow's the 2nd Tuesday, or it's
Yep.
Thursday.
Regular meeting for them.
Yep,
For the planning
so it
board?
could be. It could be. Is that when the school board is gonna be coming and talking about the noise and the bouncing around of the destruction, construction?
Well, we didn't know it was on the agenda for tomorrow, but I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's the case, that might, okay. Stacy might know, because she was mentioning it at the school board meeting, so,
Yeah, she got a letter.
yeah, yeah. Questions on, Bartlett? Lisa, are we correct that you're gonna take A and F on the 16th? Did I get that correct?
Yeah,
With all the
that's-
emails that were going
Yes,
around?
yep.
And while we're here, Checker, do you have June 20th?
I do.
Okay. And check with Elizabeth to see if she's gonna be okay for the 6th. How's that?
6th of June.
Oh,
Yeah,
Is that when she is? Okay.
because it might be good. She might wanna
Might
know
have
if
to
she
switch.
can, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Let-
she,
Right now.
wasn't the 6 mine?
It was
Originally-
when she traded
Yeah,
with you.
she traded with me.
Right, so you're okay.
Yeah, so she did say the 6 was good for her at that time.
Yes,
that
but she
time.
just recently had
Had
surgery,
surgery.
so we'll see how she's feeling.
Because I didn't say it.
Oh, yeah.
So she was, so you might wanna just, and if not, just let me know, cause if I have to go, it's not like I've not double negatives. I've been there before. They're usually pretty nice to me, they haven't. You wanna talk about Maple Ave, Checker?
Sure. I went to see Suzanne last Friday. Very similar to what David was saying at Bartlett. They're closing out all their accounts for this year. Couple little things. Maple Ave is not going to be a Title I school next year, which means they will have no Title I funding. That redesignates them as a school of choice.
Can you tell us what that means?
What that means.
And
What
how
that-
that affects appropriations or
Sure.
revenues?
Well, Title I funding is, you become a Title I school based on the amount of free and reduced lunches that your school has, or offers, I should say, to their students. And then, based on those numbers, you get funding, which you can use to hire positions, hire people to remediate students or provide interventions for students in math and reading. So it's a really great, it's a real plus in that sense. This year, they've come in and done a Title I audit and found that Maple Ave no longer qualifies for Title I monies. We don't have enough students who are qualifying for free and reduced lunch, that we no longer qualify for those federal funds, and we'll be losing that funding, which means that we'll be losing
Is that 'cause the
those
enrollment's
services.
down? Or is the criteria
It's-
increased, or?
It's the
It-
amount of people who apply for free
Yeah,
and reduced
it,
lunch
it,
in your
it's
population.
those who actually apply.
Apply for
And if they
free and
don't
reduced
apply, we don't know.
Right, but we've made a major effort to reach out and encourage.
To recruit 'em?
Oh,
the
yeah.
but
So socioeconomically, the demographics are changing.
Possibly.
Or they're just not
Or they're
applying.
just not applying.
Right.
Absolutely.
Do we understand the resulting decrease in revenue? How much that is?
exactly how much that is?
No,
I don't-
ballpark. 60,000, 100,000?
I don't know.
It's under 100.
It's
Yeah.
under 100, okay.
In fact, if I had to guess, I'd even go so far on a limb as to say it's probably under 50.
Okay. Gives me a better ballpark.
And to modify the point Sue already made, we actually have devised a system by where we figured out ways to reach out to people without having to deal with privacy issues, in order to try to, through a variety of different means, identify people and then make sure that at the very least they have the opportunity and understand that they may be eligible should they apply. But you can't twist anybody's arm.
Is this gone, like, till when? Till the next time we get enough people, or is there a calendar day, or?
Go ahead.
You need a threshold.
Yeah,
Oh, so it
Yeah.
we could get it
we
back?
could get it back.
Okay.
We could get it back.
We won't get it back for the year,
That's right.
but in theory, if we believe we've reached that threshold,
Okay.
So it's an annual audit kind of thing. So if we meet the
Really not
threshold in
annual.
October,
It's
Not
not
annual?
annual.
I don't know that it's an annual audit. I know that our audit caused us to identify that Maple Avenue was no longer eligible for
We-
funds.
I can say it's not an annual audit.
right, what I meant to say, not the audit was annual, but the loss of funds was for the entire school year.
Yes.
Even if we meet the criteria September 5th of this year, it's irrelevant.
Oh,
Okay.
Yes.
That-
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was coming from, so it doesn't matter. We could reach out, get there, but there's nothing we can do until the 2012-2013 school year.
Right, but we can use that information.
Yes.
Absolutely.
To
And you know
reapply,
how
so to
long it
speak.
takes those initiatives to reach out in the community, so.
With the federal government?
So we'll start now.
All right.
So that's not a good thing in sense of
Okay.
losing some services
Okay.
for students.
But you still haven't school of choice.
Absolutely.
What's that mean?
What's it mean, he wants to know?
Oh, that means that we're not a Title I school, so that's really, it's just, we're no longer considered Title I, we're considered a school of choice.
I think that's
what
worth
they
some kind of
redesignated
federal
as.
funding, right?
It would be nice.
If we so
I-
choose.
Yes.
We so choose.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
All right.
Was that revenue that is gonna be lost planned for? Was it part of the revenue totals?
Title
I
I
believe we
funds.
projected that revenue in our projections.
You
for
did.
the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're
So that
usually in
would
there.
affect, yeah.
So, other than that, we've got Literacy Night coming up at Maple Ave on the 24th from 6:30 to 8. If anybody would like to go in the schools and see what's going on at Maple Ave in terms of literacy, it's a great night to walk through and see some of the students' work. We've got fourth graders taking the science kneecap this week, and that's the New England Common Assessment Program testing. And the Memorial Day program coming up on the 27th, that's an outside program. that the Public is also more than welcome to from 1:30 to 3, rain, weather permitting, we should say.
questions for Maple Ave for checkup? Let me read Elizabeth's SAU Glen Lake. Glen Lake, the school is very busy with end-of-the-year planning. Have we heard that before? Getting their students ready for the big transition, which is kindergarten to first grade and preschool to kindergarten. Because of the high number of students with IEPs at this level, the transition process is pretty onerous, speaking from my own experience with my daughter. You can't believe all the paperwork and meetings involved in getting her ready for the move to Maple Ave. The budgetary situation are more or less the same as it was a month ago. Funding is very tight, but they will just have enough to cover expenses through the end of the year with not much left over. Okay, any questions? I won't have any answers for you, but within the district, because she also has the SAU, the funding for district expenses is also in the same general position as last month. They're predicting they'll have just enough to scrape by at the end of the year. There's a small bubble in a few lines, meaning they haven't been expended as much as other lines yet, but this bubble is due to the fact that most out-of-district expenses are billed quarterly, and the next billing period won't be until June, at which time that bubble would disappear. Okay? And then she had some general notes, I'm not sure. Generally, they've expended 96% of the funds for the school year. There's no estimate right now that we know of, we had a pretty good handle, I think last year we said there was gonna be a certain amount of appropriation that was expected. Is that anywhere near making that estimate at this time, Sue, do you know?
I'm not aware of an estimate.
Okay. Yeah, we don't either. I was estimating $10. I mean, it's just was.
That may be generous.
Yeah, it might be. So it's, and then we already covered the other thing, that the question she had, and I think we talked about it earlier today, so that's, and of course, she ends all her emails, cheers, Elizabeth, so cheers, Elizabeth, hope you're feeling better. Are there any questions on the SAU or Glen Lake that we want to discuss, if you looked at anything? No? Okay. Any general questions on the high school? Sue, do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
I haven't heard anything from the high school, other than the good news things you heard at meetings.
Okay.
I mean, high school's won, it's not financial, but has won a bunch of awards lately, high school and its personnel. I think Goffstown High School can be considered one of the best high schools in the state of New Hampshire these days. And that's a giant leap in the right direction. And I say that as a parent of 4 kids who went through there when it wasn't one of the best high schools in the state.
Any questions for Sue?
How's Ivan doing on his field trip to the?
I don't know, I was hoping to see
I
him
know about
tonight to
that.
ask him.
Well, let's hear
I
it.
do. I happened to actually, I taught a class this week, which was a lot of fun on
Did you get
insurance.
fingerprinted?
What?
Did you get fingerprinted so you could?
What? Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on file, at the police department. And I talked to Frank McBride afterwards, and he said that he did arrange a schedule for Ivan, but unfortunately Ivan couldn't make it. Now he's out of the country or something. So, but it's all lined up for Ivan to spend time in different classrooms, and he's free to do it. I will say that I was very impressed with the students that I was in the classroom with. They were we talked a lot about economics, and they were very they were very in tune. One of the things we talked about was health insurance, and factors as why they're increasing. And I'm telling you, these guys, they knew 7 out of the 8 reasons why health insurance costs are skyrocketing. So I was pretty impressed, and it's a great. It's so different, than say 10 years ago. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it is like night and day difference, that high school. And when you walk around, it's just a great environment there. So I'm sure Ivan will have the same experience. It was really, it's just, like I said, I was on that school board 10 years ago, and I'm telling you, it is, I just cannot believe the difference when you walk the halls, and just the way the staff interacts. Because I also had a meeting for the 250th with some of the staff there, as they're gonna get involved, and it's just a really well-run place.
Further questions on the school? We are actually gonna kind of skip the village district reports because both Bill and Dick couldn't be here today. which gets me to segue to new business.
I was gonna ask Bill some questions about the water pressure for our fire that we had on Center Street down here.
Well, that's a good question, because I heard that, I don't know if it was the water pressure, or there just wasn't enough water from one hydrant to take care of it. Do you think there was a pressure problem?
There are pressure problems,
Okay,
There
and that's
has
all
been.
comes right
There
from
have been.
Manchester, right?
but there are pressure problems too.
Okay.
You know, a couple of the tankers, after they left,
Filled up at Glen
filled
Lake.
up on the hydrant
Yeah, I
across
know.
from the Glen Lake,
Yeah.
and I couldn't fill up my coffee pot, because there was nothing coming up, until they finished filling up the tanker, and then I had pressure again. I know it's not the same village district.
Which really underscores the need to, what I did here was that there is a very large water main and then, that we have, but then it bottlenecks to like a 4-inch,
Oh, my goodness.
where it gets onto the Manchester side. So that's part of what the problem
The
is.
limitation.
Oh, gee, yeah.
Bruce Rand told me that, so,
Well, Bruce should know.
and he should know, he's one of the people in the know over there.
Can we get a reduction on what it cost for our hydrants?
Oh, don't go there.
Well, actually, I was gonna just mention something about that, you know,
I
there
knew
was
that
no
was gonna
increase in
stir up
price
thought.
for using the hydrant not so often, right?
I'd like to make official inquiry to the water precinct as possible.
Let me, I'm gonna
Oh,
take a step
my.
back, because there was something I did hear, and I didn't ask, and I need to ask Scott. It's about the fire department, and it's about the funding that the committee actually agreed to for communications, to get the communications up running. So I'm gonna ask you a pointed question, of how is that going, and how are the communications actually working?
I have no clue.
Okay,
I think it's still a work in progress. In terms of the voter repeater systems,
yes,
yeah, it's still a work in progress.
okay.
I'm putting it down as a question.
Put it down as a
It's-
question.
It'd be a great question, because that's what I heard, was that it was a challenge and still a work in process. And we had heard so many good things about it working in Ware, or New Boston, or Dumbarton, one of those towns, yeah, one of
Ware.
those towns
Ware.
was working well, and we had some high hopes to solve a problem, so I'm hoping we're getting there, because we was scheduled to have it rolled out to the police soon, so that they can get coverage, because there's nothing worse than trying to need help and you just can't contact, so. Did you guys get a copy of, a scanned copy of this local officials workshop? Okay, cool. Then you all know about it. Any questions? Okay. Anybody go to this, last year, year before?
I did. I went to both of them.
And would you like to give the group a little comment on whether you thought it was useful, or a complete waste of your time? Or anything in between?
I really enjoyed there was one that was really tailored for the selectmen.
Yep, that's a piece of this.
Yeah, I would really recommend that one. The budget committee one, was okay, it had some information. But what I really enjoyed about the selectmen is it gives you an idea of what they're thinking and what their processes are. So, I understand why they do what they do.
Glad you do.
Yes.
They don't.
So I think it's really beneficial to a budget member to know that.
Okay. And Scott, and then we'll go over to Jen.
I talked to Sue about this, and if there was enough interest, she would try to have a couple of folks from LGC and maybe an attorney come down and present a workshop, if there was enough interest. And when I
We've
say
done it
enough
before.
interest, which we've done before,
Yeah.
it really would need to be like 8 to 10 of the budget committee members. I don't think
least.
it would be worthwhile to do it for 4 or 5,
No,
so.
no.
If there is that interest, then Sue can make those arrangements to do it, and she'll,
And we could have it done in the evening, and this
yeah,
is
we can have
not,
it done in the evening, and it could be, probably in August, maybe some type of thing when you don't usually meet. And, so, the only thing, you just need some lead time, so maybe that's a decision that maybe you wanna make tonight, because if you do, then,
but we can talk about it tonight, we can make we can. Who would
or
be?
next
yeah,
month,
take it under-
definitely, cause, yeah.
We would have to do it. If the
Yeah.
decision isn't made next month, then it's probably
Then
not gonna
it
happen.
won't happen.
It's not gonna
Right.
happen. So,
Well, then you get these fancy certificates that I
Wow.
forgot that I had.
it's a certificate of attendance. It
Yes.
doesn't say. I was hoping it said certificate of paying attention.
No, I was there.
Comprehension.
Yeah, participation.
There will be a test.
Everybody wins.
All right. Is there any other new business? Bill?
I have a couple new business or things to carry forward for consideration. The first one, just as we did, we discussed last year in May, was to have the committee consider providing,
Guidance. Is that the word?
yeah, and not just one, but my thought was, is not to, last year, we summarily came up with a 10% number, and I'm thinking because of the divergence of views, perhaps providing direction to the departments on 2 or possibly 3 different scenarios budget scenarios we'd like them to plan for in the fall cycle time. And whether or not we could come up with 1, 2, or 3 by next meeting.
Okay. I have to take one step back because Jen had her hand up after Scott did on a previous topic.
Yeah, no, it's, okay, I was just gonna talk about the budget committee presentation. John and I actually went to the same one. I think for new members, the first half is useful. And then kinda after lunch, you kinda get glazed over it and it turned to conversation that really didn't pertain to us. But I also thought that the small groups, that when you're sitting at a table, you start to converse with other people at your table, and I know I got a lot out of those conversations, like, oh, your town's dealing with that, or whatever. So, anyway, I think the first half is useful, plan on leaving early.
I plan
My
on
tip.
leaving early. No certificate of completion.
Right. No, we got him. We still got him.
One of the things we had talked about, Bill, was maybe something even more solid than that. I think, was even Scott who may have come up and said, okay, guys, if you're thinking of this, just tell us, which is, give me nothing. I want a flat fund. Or if you're thinking 1%. But necessarily going through the process of various scenarios, it might be something different by saying a distinct thing of what we're looking for, and by saying, okay, what would happen if you had so much more, so much less, rather than a complete budget. It's the
Well,
same thing.
And I'm in general agreement with that. The only thing I would say is, and because it was done, I think for the first time last year, the meaning of the request got distorted.
Okay, yep.
And if we're just clear why we want to do this, for the exercise of what we're trying to think through certain line item impacts and the like, I just want to make sure that the request doesn't get distorted and then people disregard it. So I just, that's all I'm trying to
Okay.
say is.
So I think if we went ahead and said, okay, submit a level funded budget, just for the heck of it.
Mhm.
If we said that and say, what would happen, or what would you need to do if something happened between now and October that it looks real drastic and we would have to reduce it by some percentage? Or what would happen now if it looks like the economy's coming up and we would have 1 or 2% or something more? Phased that way, is that something that appears like it's understandable, Suzanne?
It's understandable. I don't know if it's doable.
Okay. Well,
It's still a scenario where you're asking them to practically prepare separate budgets. And the size of our budget is, it's just
Right.
too time consuming.
Having professionally had to do budgets for years and helping state agencies create budgets, some of the things that we used to do is segregate things between fixed cost and variable cost. And taking a look at those kind of things. And it was difficult at times to try to get through that, but that's something that we could probably help deal with, because there are some fixed costs. You have a certain amount of students, and your thought process is, I am looking for this kind of head count, and this is gonna cost these amount of teachers. And so that's something, whether you had 2% more or 2% less, may or may not be the first place you'd go to do at that point. But if it got to a certain point where drastic cuts had to be made, then you have to say, okay, class size would have to be bigger, and if that were the case, what would happen? I mean, it's not a whole lot of difference from going right now that the school boards had to struggle with for the last couple of months. Saying, we were planning or hoping to have this amount, we ended up with a default. what's our plan now for default? We gotta go through something. And that's kinda like the same kind of thinking that I believe is what Bill is inferring in
Yes.
his question. Is what would happen if we had $1 million less for the school? What would have to give? What would happen if we ended up having $1 million? Could we put that AP class in? Because we could get 15 kids into that or something of that nature. That's, I mean, as we say, if we understand the question, it's kind of half of it. Doable is something that's a little different.
Well, and it's just a reality that, you know, while there are signs that the economy is trending the right way, you don't budget for the economy that you hope to happen. You budget for the economy you're in now, and you always look backward. You look backward and say, where have we been? Let's budget that way. You plan on the realities and you hope for the best. That's, you never spend or plan for a better economy if you don't know, if you don't have any certainty, and you can never get economists to agree on that, so you don't plan or you budget for a better economy than what you're in, especially when you're in a down cycle. So that's, and I think we do our work better if we can figure out a way to have some kind, to do some kind of scenario and to go into the fall with some kind of understanding of, to your point. If certain things happen, what are the line items that you would have to, you would really see really taking a hit? So we can understand that too.
I guess my concern with that is, much like the discussion we had earlier tonight about positions that were in the default budget and now, it's fluid. There's no way we can say to you, well, we're gonna take this out and this out and this out, and then something happens such as fuel costs, and it throws a monkey wrench into the whole thing.
I guess my point is, if it's just for modeling purposes,
But unfortunately, that usually doesn't stay as a modeling purpose. Somebody will come along and say, but you said you would do this,
Well, we could.
if you didn't get
I'm,
that.
I-
Well,
I'm sorry, I mean,
past history.
I don't,
Yeah.
okay.
That's what
point
we're
well
trying
taken.
to,
Yeah.
that's what
We're
we're
trying to
trying
do
to
things different.
modify, yeah.
And that's
And-
the point is,
You're
to
on
your
tape, you
point-
realize that.
to your point, if we start with something early in the process, and you disclaimer it that way, because that should be, if you're going to do that work to do that, you should be entitled to disclaimer it that way, and then later on, when we get into October, when we have the big meetings, then you firm up your numbers and say, well, we modeled on the basis of this, we came to final numbers based on what we think the real need is.
And I will tell you, the budgeting process is on our agenda for our workshop
Okay,
Saturday.
and so that's one new business. The other new business
Oh, wait,
goes.
Wait a
let's
minute,
not
I
go
have a
there
com-
yet. We're not, we're
Okay.
gonna stick with that one. But I was gonna bring Jen into it as well, to say, you understand what we're thinking, and what, the model is a set point in time, and even if it's fluid, it could change every 3 weeks, because we can say, you know what? Planning
day.
board just allowed for a new housing project, and we're estimating another 20 kids at Bartlett. What are we doing? I mean, that all of a sudden changes everything, but that's okay, because when we go to the model, we can look at the model and say, okay, how's that gonna affect? Lisa?
I was just gonna say, you know, this speaks to the budget committee's process. And I think that I'm here sitting at this table because the voters didn't like it last year. So what you're proposing is kind of the same of what you did last year, you're just asking
No,
for
it's not.
different numbers.
Hang on for a second, let me
Well, that's
keep
what it
going.
sounds like to me. It sounds like you're asking the school, you're putting the school or the SAU or the school board, you're putting the onus on them to create a budget to look different ways, and then maybe you can, I'm not even sure, I'm still not clear what you'll do with it. Let me just, my view of this, and I don't have any of the experience that you all have, but the way I am approaching this is I'm meeting with my building principal, we're hearing the reports, okay, from everybody, and then when they come in, when the school board comes in, when the selectmen come in, then we use the information we have to decide, do we support this or don't we, and why? Because we've done our homework as we've been going along, and we're gathering our information. I think it's above and beyond to ask the school, and maybe you do it for the town as well, to prepare these different budgets for, and I guess my comment is, it seems like a lot of work for them to do, And my second is, what do we do with all this information once we have it? I honestly don't know, I'm asking you.
Okay, well, let me answer that question. Our perspective from the Budget Committee is to come from available funds. That's the basis of where you start with. It's not the need, it's the available funds. And then we work towards the need. That's what a Budget Committee is for. The school board is to say, this is what I need, okay? And the Budget Committee says, this is what kind of funding, and somehow we gotta try to meet someplace.
Okay.
And it could be all the way here, because the need, there might be enough, and there's been in years in the past, there's been enough funds to completely meet the need. And then pick up some things, and that has happened in the past. And that's where we're doing. What I see different is, I believe the communication is attempting to better understand and analyze. Last year, I believe it was saying, the interpretation was the Budget Committee is gonna submit a budget 10% less than the previous year. And that isn't necessarily what the entire committee was looking at. I think they were looking at, because it ended up not being that at all. For me, what it was to say, what I indicated tonight is, what would happen if we didn't have as much money as a group felt to be able to put towards the school? What would have to go? If we had more money, what is the first thing you would like to do to put back in, so to speak? And that's what I am looking for, because looking at the funding, if, for instance, the analysis, like there's a $4 tax rate increase over a current tax rate, which would end up being at this point, 10, 15%, I don't know what it is, that's probably a very large increase for today. That's what I'm saying. And we'd look at that and say, oh, do you really think the taxpayers can fund that? This is what this committee is supposed to look at first. Not necessarily agree or disagree with how they're spending the money, but we can look at some of that stuff and say, okay, this is what we think. In the past, this committee has looked at technology and saying, I'm not so sure we can fund that technology. And then all the questions come from other people saying, well, gee whiz, we think this, that. So we ask the question. From my perspective, being hit with those questions, say, why did you do that? Well, let's ask them. Let's ask the governing board saying, if you didn't have enough money, what would you want not to spend?
But I guess my problem, or my concern with that, is what Suzanne said and what we heard from Phil, that these budgets are fluid.
They are.
And they're planning a year in advance for circumstances that are really beyond their control. So
That's
to
the
have
budget.
them do this, well, understandably so, but with this budget, you're talking about little human beings, and I'm not trying to be over dramatic, but their needs change. And I know you're saying we don't care about the needs, but the needs.
No. We
Well,
do
you're
care
saying that we
about the
don't
needs.
address
That's
the
not our
needs.
primary, that's
Okay, but the needs are part of the scenario.
the
They're
correction
part
of the budget.
numbers,
Absolutely.
So I guess that's my concern in having the school prepare these scenarios. And maybe I don't understand
Maybe you're
what
thinking
Bill's
too much in a
saying.
scenario.
Yeah,
Maybe I am. Maybe I just don't understand the.
I'm
And
gonna-
I may
I'm
not
gonna
be saying it
segue.
right.
Hang-
I mean,
hey,
I-
Bill, I'm gonna segue to Scott. He's had his hand up for a while and checker and see if various discussions might help, and I'm coming back around to you.
I really gotta get,
Yes,
work
I know.
tomorrow.
You already told me, so go ahead.
Um,
Thank you, John.
I guess, Mr. Chair, I understand what you're saying. I guess I would alter it slightly, in my opinion. The Budget Committee's job is to prepare the budget by the statute. Doesn't say anything about needs, doesn't say anything about the amount of money.
That's correct.
I think it's all of those things.
That's correct.
And I think, is it more of an emphasis on how much money we have? Yes. Is the governing boards focus more on the needs? I think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
That being said, I look at this as, and I said it at the last meeting, we went through an exercise of what would a 5% reduction and a 10% reduction look like. I don't think that went all that well, in my own opinion. That being said, I don't think that the presentations of having a 7% increase, I think that's what it was all that great either, and we ended up with a default. In my opinion,
Flat.
Right.
School default.
Right. In my opinion only, and this is not representative of the Board of Selectmen, this is Scott Gross's opinion, is that we're looking at, in light of the fact that on the school side, you have contracts on both your support and your teachers, So now you're talking about a budget which is essentially pretty level. You're probably gonna be looking at a level budget or a nominal type increase based upon needs, and then it'll be your contract will be driving those other costs.
I
On the
would-
town side, we have something very similar. We have 2 of our bargaining units that are under contract, 2 of them aren't, so it's gonna be essentially level or nominal. And I think our economy is improving. It's doing it slowly, but it's improving. But I don't see either of our boards coming forward with a 5 or a 10% increase, nor do I think that a 5 or 10% decrease is there. I see that being 0 to 2, 0 to 3%, and trying to work, and if we can agree on that parameter, and let's eliminate that negative 5 and 10%, let's eliminate the 7, 10, increase, because that's not palatable to the folks either. And if we can focus in on that narrow band, maybe we'll be more productive. Because it puts the fear of God in some of these people when we start talking about -5 and -10, and then +5 and +10, everybody goes nutty. But if you can put it into a closer range that is more palatable.
For particular projects is what I was trying to get to.
Right. Sue?
I might agree with you, except that this budget that we're in now is the 3rd year in a row where the school budget's taken a major hit. The one that we're in now is the worst, because we're $1 million below the default for this year that ends June 30th.
And
And
you
have
don't know
to-
what, and you don't know what's gonna happen on it. In fairness to you, you don't know what happened on the governor's level either, and you could get
no.
more, so I mean, I understand.
No, but we had a contract deadline, and if there's a potential for losing personnel, we had to let them know
Right.
by April 15th, which is why.
Right.
So, but my concern is, I don't see where it's gonna be possible for us to come in with anything lower, considering our history.
But that's what my point was. I made the same
And
statement last.
to say that
last
we're
month.
not gonna propose something with a 5% increase, I can't say that.
You may, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that, in my humble opinion, that number is probably gonna be 0 to 2 or 3. That, I don't think a 5 or, that's just me. And is I think that's what happened last year, and it died. And then people got angry when the budget committee said, well, what is 5% reduction or a 10% reduction? So to me, the voters have spoken loud and clear. They want something pragmatic. And that's not to say that with a contract, you're still gonna have an increase, because there'll be a cost there, but they're gonna get to vote on that.
Right, and I, although the range is up to question, I fundamentally agree with what you said. And my purpose of doing this, when I got here last year, was to change the way things were going. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's broke. So I'm ready to try something new. That's one thing that we tried last year that got mischaracterized and blown out of all problems. So I'm trying to be more prudent with how it comes out as guidance or direction and the purpose of it, because it was mischaracterized last year, and that's unfortunate. I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone, but it was mischaracterized. So that's the first thing. And then,
Not a different idea yet, because I
No.
have 2 people who want to
Okay.
talk about on that same idea. Got Checker and Jen.
Go ahead. I'm gonna pass.
Are you sure?
Yeah, Scott pretty much
Okay.
got it.
Just hearing Scott and Sue speak about your respected areas, it reminded me that, and this is my personal opinion as our role on the budget committee, is it's very important for me not to come in with a bias of a number that I'm looking for. For me, it's important for me to look at each line, and someone said it earlier, and I don't know who it is, so I apologize, but you look at each thing, does that make sense? Can we afford that thing? I really don't think the process worked in its entirety last year, because several members came in with a number in mind. We are gonna meet this number no matter what, and disregarded some of the important, the important things. And so I think we have to be really careful with these generalizations. I know it's my opinion that I don't feel right coming in, and I'm certainly not gonna come in embracing a percent or a number. I didn't last year, and I won't do it again this year. We have to respect the leaders of these departments to do the best that they can and question them where we disagree. And I don't know what the RSA says is what our role is, but I don't think it says come on in with a X% every year. So that's just my 2 cents.
Two
So-
pieces, if you can help clarify for me, is if we just let it roll the way it rolls, and it does come in at 7%, how do you then make a decision whether that's palatable or not, and what's your basis for the decision?
And that's an excellent question. I think where, the reason why I felt the need to say what I said is because Scott was saying, okay, how about we narrow it down to here? And I think that made a lot of sense for me. I think last year, we were all over the map. We were at 10%.
When you say narrow it down, you,
Well, I mean,
We
that,
had a
Would you-
17%, we had folks at 10% cut, and I think that the budget proposed for 7, I think it was 7. I could be wrong, might have been higher.
It was 5.5.
Okay, I apologize, 5.5. So we were at a 15% spread. And I'm saying, can we get to a point where we're at a
Right.
5%
Understand, but
spread
what
or
I'm-
something?
I
What I'm
understand
trying to
what you're
pull
saying,
from
and
you-
I'm
you-
less concerned about how we pare it down. I'm more concerned about people coming in and saying, it's gotta be 10%, and I'm not gonna see anything else
okay,
other
but if
than
you
the
gave them a
10%.
general, are you in favor of giving a general comment saying we'd like to see something close to a level funded budget, or something of that
I was
nature?
a huge proponent last year of seeing, I think what I said is it would be very useful for the public, and I heard from the
Yeah.
public, to see what it would look like if these certain cuts needed to be made. And to take those into consideration, absolutely. But to go in driven that you are not gonna see anything else but
Okay.
that number is unfair.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Lisa?
Well, I guess, I'm the minority here, maybe I'm not seeing the big picture, but to my mind, it just would make sense if if we're liaisons we each have a department. I know we're not supposed to be experts, but we're supposed to be, I think you used the term, information gatherers.
Mhm.
So if I'm meeting with David, for example, I'm gonna kinda know Bartlett, I'm gonna know what makes sense, I'm gonna know what doesn't make sense. And I see my job here as having a critical eye when those numbers come in and they're presented by the SAU to say, hey, that doesn't make sense. And so that's how I think that that would make sense to me to attack it that way. Now, I will tell you, I've only been here 3 months, there are people on this committee who, it's obvious they don't meet with their liaison. So for them, that process is not gonna work. So I guess as a new member, I'm trying to discern what I feel comfortable doing and what as a committee we think we should be doing. And if it's, just one more thing, and if it is to just kind of suggest these, ranges to the governing boards, and then we sit back and kind of sit around and talk about that, then that's one thing. I don't really want to be a part of that. I mean, I will if I have to be. I'm going to keep meeting with David so I can make informed decisions, but my personal feeling is it is very important for each one of us to become that information gathering liaison.
Agreed, and I think that is what helps us come into play when we actually get the budget.
Right.
But at what point are you comfortable at getting a budget, and then if you had a certain amount of money in your pocket, okay, because everybody has a certain amount of money that they're thinking that they could afford for either a tax rate increase or something, that's generic, people think about that all the time. And a budget came in that was in excess of that. How would you look at your area of expertise and help this committee in that respect? I mean, you're looking at Bartlett, and you can say, and I can almost guarantee everything's gonna make sense. It's gonna make sense. What they asked for makes sense, but that's where the tough part comes. Where you say, my pocket has what I think I can afford, but what's making sense is more than what I think I can afford, so what do I do?
Right.
And what Scott has asked, being from the representative of a governing board, is saying, oh, okay, everybody's got that idea, okay? Can you guys talk about and just give me something that I can brag to the selectmen to say, okay, we're gonna work hard. In 1 year, they worked very hard, and the school worked very hard coming up with a number, and all of a sudden, the majority of the budget committee said, you know what? Boom, this is it. And they're saying, gee whiz, if I would've known this earlier, I could have been prepared for that to happen.
All right, I guess that makes sense to me. I just, the whole 10% thing last year, that's just, what Scott said is just way too drastic.
Yeah. And there were drastic things going on in the economy last year that seemed to settle down somewhat. That's the only thing I can think of. So this year, I think the words that are being used are trying to be used more carefully, as saying it's not, for me anyway, it's doing the same thing I've been doing for these past 8 years, is looking what's been prepared. And for me, it's helpful, rather than go through and completely talk about it, if I could give you in saying, okay, Scott, I think I would be more comfortable with $100,000 less in your budget, and you came to me and say, well, we thought about it, and here's where we'd like to do it. Rather than me come up with it, it certainly would be nice to have the governing board who has to enact it, the school or the town, to say, this is what I would do if that's what you guys are gonna come to a majority.
That's the essence of why I wanted to do it that way. Because I will never know their budget as good as they know. And I'm not even gonna pretend to go there. Quite frankly, I disagree with you on the percentage thing. And the percentage thing, as far as I'm concerned, I let the managers manage and make the decisions on where, because it's a bottom line budget. I could tell them to cut a line, and they're not compelled to do anything. It's a bottom line budget. So as far as I'm concerned, what you just said is the reason we want to do it, is because we want them to come forward with how this might look if we do that 0 level fund, or if we do that 3%, whatever the range you said. Because I'm not as good at it as they are. They have to live with that all the time. And then during the process last year, aside from the 10%, it was this demonization of certain people that said the budget committee was making certain decisions about certain line items, and why would we do this and why would we do that? I want to avoid that this year. So this is to improve from what happened last year for that very reason, which is why I'm proposing it, and that's all I'll say
Guy?
at this point.
Yeah, and to follow on with what you're saying, it's obvious, we still have a problem with the 10%, because Lisa, you still don't seem to understand. Last year, we were not asking for 10%. We never did. We asked.
Right.
Set it as a target. We don't know. We didn't know. We never cut the budget even close to 10%. We sat and said, well, take a shot. Is that doable?
Well, you did ask.
The
You
town-
asked to see what it would look like.
Right.
I understand that.
It was just a goal.
Yeah.
And the town went through the exercise with their department heads. We said, geez, it all makes sense. The school didn't bother. But it was not, nobody intended, I don't think anybody believed we would ever get to 10%, or even close.
So then why, so why ask for it?
I personally believe that it can be done. Whether we would have gotten there or not, I never expected we would. But I certainly believe that any
Oh,
budget
I guess we did.
It may
survive.
have been, go ahead, Scott.
I was just say, last year was last year. Let's put that behind us. Let's
would
worry
agree.
about now. Let's worry about the
Okay.
future of our community. I think things are starting to look better, but we're not out of this yet, and we got to do it in a measured way. And I don't think that necessarily that ranges or setting targets is necessarily a bad thing. It's done in the private sector all the time. And I know private and the public are different, and I've learned that over the years. But, giving me some direction and my board some direction as to where you think this thing may go is helpful. I'd rather do that than jerk around over 4 or 5 months, going back and forth, asking a bazillion questions, and at the end of the day saying, oh, we're gonna level fund it, or, oh, we're gonna give you 1%, or, just kind of tell me where you think you're going, and I don't mind having debates and discussions
That's right.
over a small amount, a percentage here and there. But when we're going back and forth on 10% and this and that, it was just an exercise in futility, I think. And it angered a lot of people. There's no need to do that. So, we've got, the thing is this, is that we have the responsibility to try to predict what the citizens are gonna vote on. And also to give them some guidance as to what is gonna be good for the community. I can tell you that if we have repeated default budgets in the school and repeated default budgets on, say, the town side, we are going to see an erosion of what we have today. Our roads will not improve. we're gonna have more equipment breakdown, it's just the way it's gonna go. You can't expect your own personal household to continue to be level if you're seeing an erosion of your buying power. Because asphalt prices go up, fuel prices go up, salaries, in some cases are going up. So you can play that game for a few years, you can't play it forever. So that being said, I do think that nominal increases are called for, but they have to be measured, and like I said, you can't ask for 7% and it's not there yet. But we need to be incremental, and if we do that, we're gonna be better. And I think what happens is sometimes governing boards ask for too much and then they get nothing. And then you gotta take yourself out of a hole. If you do it small and measured, you're okay. Drastic extremes either way don't work.
I agree.
What's your next point?
My next point is, and by the way, this was gonna be asked for all departments. The school's not being singled out. We'd never do that. But in this case, I have another one that, and I'm not even sure if we can do anything with it, because this is a problem that I've heard from Budget Committee people before I came to the Budget Committee, and I didn't see it get any better last year. And the current way the school presents the budget or gives us the numbers, that just doesn't work. I know it's complex, and you're saying, well, how on earth are we gonna make something simpler for the Budget Committee? And how would we do that? And that sounds like a lot of work. I don't have the answer. But if there's any way that, because I think it will help the process and it will help get more people on board to ultimately what the school needs. If there's any way to figure out a template, if you will, I don't know how else to say it, a template that would be a Budget Committee template that the school could take derivative numbers off of to present their numbers in a way that would be easier and palatable for the exercise we have to go through. I strongly recommend.
I would like that for us.
Well, yeah,
I
that
mean,
too.
it's
Well,
not an easy
136
document for us
pages is
to digest either.
And I'm just saying that, people told me this process was broke before I got here, and it just doesn't seem to get better, and because of the complexity and everything that has to go on there's just gotta be a better way for this group to be able to grasp and to dig in. I know that you're specializing people in certain areas. I think that's a really good idea, by the way.
It's a thought process, I'm not sure.
Well, it's a better idea than what we had before, so it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's an attempt at an improvement.
I guess I can't,
And you're gonna say to me, well, what would that be, Bill?
yeah,
And I don't know what it
exactly.
is, but
because we prepare our budgets and
I know,
we
but
present it
just
according to
saying,
the
like,
rules that we have to live by.
The sheer size
this
of it, or
pile of
just-
crap,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not your fault, it's just the way it is.
It's mandated that we do
huge.
it that
Well,
way.
Well,
There's,
a certain output is mandated, and of course,
No,
for
but
the-
to set up our
for the
whole
school
system
and
that
for the
way.
bean counters at the school, they've developed a system that works very well for them for a day-to-day operations, and I completely understand why they do it. But I'm saying for the purpose of this committee and the work that they have to do, if there's an output template that could be created that would make it easier to digest for us to have this conversation, I'd be willing to spend time to hash this out with how that might work. But I'm just saying, it's broke. It's really broke.
I don't know how else we'd present it.
well, there's a way for us to go through, and in the RSA, it tells us what columns we're supposed to be using.
Yeah,
And they're not all on the submission we get from the school. We get it in 3 different papers instead of 1. Last year, we got it in 2 because Ray actually put 2 of them into an Excel spreadsheet. And that helped a little bit, but there was one of the third columns that was still missing from there. I'm not sure yet, but I can come back and go through it. Did you have an idea, Jen, on something? You were thinking?
I was thinking, of course, my whole first meeting, I should probably just bite my tongue and listen. But
No, you shouldn't.
Good
wearing
idea.
my training wheels here, if you're gonna request a template, I don't think it's fair that you should ask the body who's preparing the information for this template to prepare the template as well. Now, like I said, I still have my brand new training wheels on here, so I'm probably speaking out of turn. but I know that there is significant cost and effort that goes into preparing the information that comes to you. So I think to ask to prepare the framework against which you would, I think that
It's-
the template, if there is going to be a template, should come from this body to the governing.
I think what it was, in the software program, believe it or not, the software program that the school has was something that was chosen, what, about 6, 7 years ago, maybe?
5, 6 years ago.
Of which I was a member of the subcommittee,
I picked it too.
that it was there. And I still have my notes. What was promised and what was delivered were two different things. Believe it or not, what was promised to us was the ability to have a sign-on that we could sign on in, and we could see an invoice at the lowest level and get a visual image of that invoice that rolled up. So if we started saying, you spent $10,000 this month, you could click that button, it would tell you all the vendors, pick on a vendor, and show you every single invoice. I don't think that's in place.
Well, why can't we ask Guy to write an email asking why that's not in place?
I think we've already asked.
I think we already have kind of like that, and
It's supposed to be a
there's
drill down
something. It
function.
was supposed to be a drill down function. The other thing, and it's probably there, but now they're saying that's an added cost. There was another
The
piece,
software vendor is? Oh.
and,
You gotta love
and
it.
this was done during Ray's predecessor. Ray inherited this, so I'm sure Ray has done whatever he has been able to do. From what I also understand is, we were supposed to have a report writer capability. This is the only reason.
Cognos, wasn't it Cognos?
I have no idea what it was, but we were able to design a report similar to what we'd be asking for. You pop it in there, you hit the button, alas, you got the data. You can get the data in PDF, you get the data in Excel, you get the data in a data stream. From what I understand, that is either not there, or every time we want to use it, it costs $1,000 or $1,200 to develop it, or something of that nature. That's what I understand. And it's not what we were promised. I
Is it
have-
ever?
Yeah, well,
By
it,
the vendor?
by
or-
the vendor.
Yeah.
I have the notes. You probably
We were
still
on-
have the
yeah, we
notes.
were
We
on
were
that
on the
committee
team
together.
together. We spent a lot of time reviewing this RFP. Things that I do in my day job as well is go and analyze RFPs and deal with vendors and figure out, and hold them to task when they come to it. I was not part of the group that held them to task. So I don't know how that worked. But what we would ask is that we're looking for something, okay? And I would go back to the statute that said, this is what you spent in the prior year. This is what your budget was, so that comparison there. This is what your current year-to-date is. This is what you're asking for in the budget. All those numbers are sitting right there, and you're not watching. 3 years ago, I had 3 separate items. So every time you looked at an individual item, you're gonna say, okay, well, what did we spend last year? Let me go to this book and flip through one of 300 pages, find it. Okay, what are you doing in the budget? You gotta flip through another book. There was the budget. As I said, Ray put 2 of the 3 together last year in an Excel spreadsheet, and it was wonderful, because I was able to take that Excel spreadsheet and put some of the other stuff into it, put it into a database, go through and do some analysis.
But wasn't there also some problems with the breakouts by school? Wasn't some of those expenses, I'm trying to remember the one that Christie jousted over, that had expenses that were not broken out by school, and when we asked about something, said, oh, that's over here, or whatever, it had to be qualified, and it was like, well, my God.
Well, sometimes they move stuff depending on correcting it, or it was over here, but it was more appropriate in there. That happens. I don't think it was drastic or rampant.
Especially special ed money.
But it-
Special ed money can get real.
Special ed money can get moved
Yeah.
around, but it
Can get
may
moved
have been
around.
some other stuff, but that's,
Something that was on the district level
But-
instead of on the school.
it's something
Yeah.
used to be on 000, and now it broke out to the schools, but then and sometimes they broke it out from the school and put it back into the 000.
The bottom line is, this criticism is a criticism of the system and a sincere interest in making the process this year go better. I'm not slamming the school for it. They've got what they got. Maybe the software vendor didn't deliver what they were supposed to. I don't even care about that. I mean, I just want this whole thing to go a lot better. We may all never agree on the ultimate number or the percentage or whatever it else, but can't the process go better?
It almost sounds as though the template's set up by RSA, if I'm understanding.
There is a template set up by RSA, right, and it would be nice to be able to have it delivered in that manner, but I know that would take some work.
Dan, can you reference that RSA, like email?
It's in 32, it's in the RSAs I sent you guys back, in the
March.
beginning, in March.
So that was the other thing, is when we were wading through this starting in September and October, I thought, my God, this is terrible, and someone said, yeah, it's been like that for years.
Well, it's a big
Yeah,
budget, I
It
mean,
is.
so.
It's not the size of the budget,
It's
it's,
the way
it's
it's
the
formatted.
Complexity
the
and how it's organized.
comparison of the numbers, for me anyway. Because I'm used to dealing with big budgets, it's all a bunch of little detail, just, you work with it, and then you put it into a methodology that you can actually, combine and then parse, and
Yeah.
it's not that
Last year,
bad.
I had to reformat all 2,000 lines into something that made sense, so I could even begin to analyze those Excel sheets that we got.
But technically, Guy, that, you did all that work, great, but it's something that you really shouldn't have had to do, and that's kind of what gets me.
If we
is that-
follow
But even
this
we were talking, I was
process.
talking to Lisa about this, after the last meeting, about, the 1,100 lines, it's like, that's not something that a new budget committee member, or even an experienced one's gonna be playing around manipulating. I mean, you guys are good at that, but that's not, I'm just curious, Dan, is there any way to reach out to like a few other towns, their budget committee chairs, say, hey, listen, what do you do for your process? I'd just be curious, I mean, why are we're operating this little silo here at Goffstown, but there are other communities that are similar in size or slightly, that are with similar setups, where reach out to them, or maybe we can do that homework and say, how do you guys do it?
Well, certainly with a best practices sort of thing in
We'll
mind.
get to
I
you,
mean,
John.
you're a
Either
good
that, or
point.
you
I
just
mean,
kinda jump in.
best practices in mind, it can't,
Well, I
mean,
think
can
that
only
makes
help.
sense with another school districts that's using the same software system that ours is. I think that would make the most sense, see what kind of output. But my other comment was gonna be, I think it seemed like we all agreed that this year seemed a lot better in the sense that we had Excel sheets instead of just the 270-page PDF, which we got also in paper, but, if that's all we had, that would have been impossible, in my opinion.
Right.
But the Excel sheets, with the same data, just allowing you to sort a section from lowest to highest, for example, the most simplest thing you could do. We'll never be experts, but I think it really helped us. And Guy, what you did too was, I think, phenomenally useful, amazingly useful. So I hope Excel can continue, if nothing else.
I do as well, and if we can get to the point where Scott's suggestion, and we can come to a point, this is saying, this is what we're kinda looking at it, the process might be slightly different, where we may not have to try to be experts in making a decision on certain lines where maybe we're not the experts in, and can agree to that top number. And so it could be more streamlined, because as I said, everybody's got something, whether we speak it or not, we know what our wallet wants to afford, and that's the nature of us. And sometimes you look at a few things and saying, you know what, I'm ready to squeeze a little bit more because of that, I can do that. But just to have something that gets too high, and then we get into that problem, how do we squeeze if we think it's too high? So as a committee, I would love us to think about this for a month and come back in June and come up with something and say, this is kind of like what we're thinking would be maybe too high. This is something, and I like that idea, because if we can get something that's what we're thinking about, or some reasons from the governing bodies that say, well, okay, this is what I had to do. If you're thinking that, this is what I need to do, or this is the ramifications of that, then we can make that determination saying, well, that's something that I'm willing to try to do and send to the people, or not.
And think in two terms, think of also tax rate.
Yeah, because
So there's a lot
it's
of times
not
we
all
say-
appropriation.
and a lot of times we talk in different terms, like last year, I mean, if we're saying, oh, we think we can squeeze a little bit more because there is this need and is a pressing need, then how much more in the tax rate are we willing to go?
Right, because
You
you can
know,
actually have a reduction in appropriation and an increase in tax
Right,
rate.
that happens a lot, so I think maybe it should be framed in that regard. And also, if you're experiencing, if the economy does rebound per se, and you experience a 1 or 2% increase in valuation, that gives you a little bit more room, to do things.
And that's what we ended up doing last year.
Yeah.
We ended up targeting a level tax rate.
Right.
And that's what the committee ended up with.
So I know it's 10 o'clock,
Here we
but
have
just,
to
I just have a few more things, and I'll just
Motion to
quick.
adjourn.
He said few.
The,
I know, that's
I
what,
dropped. He said one more thing, I
So
would've been
revenue-
okay. He said few.
the revenue projection
Yeah.
number
Mhm.
that ultimately gets cast or set in late November, early December. You remember the last minute fire drill and what happened. So I ask you, implore you, Mr. Chair, to preset in September a date certain cutoff for revenue projection.
It's a budget. I mean, it changes every time.
No,
What
I
I
mean
can
at the
promise
end.
you,
I mean at the end.
I tell you what we should do, and what I would hope to plan, and if I don't, please ask.
I will ask you
Every
month.
time we have a meeting, okay, we ask the question, has the revenue estimates changed? It's deadly important, because if something happens, Congress does something, the state does something, and it goes up or
I mean,
down.
I gotta.
No, I just mean
yeah.
at the end.
No, I understand that, but I have to defend, my, the governing bodies.
We don't
All
know.
of these plans that we've had, how am I supposed to know that we're gonna have X, Y, and Z, and that, we're gonna potentially lose this one, but gain this one, the governor's gonna do this, and then we're gonna do that, we're gonna change the retirement, it's so
I
damn
completely
fluid.
agree.
It's like we're so lost in
I'm
this thing.
only saying
Yeah.
that at the very end, when we are a week away, or whatever it was,
Yeah, we
a
got-
week away
Yeah.
from making that final decision, that we have an estimate we can run with. That's all I'm
Well, the
asking. A
best,
week.
the best
Had it before.
estimate at the time.
At that time,
At
at that
the
time,
time.
yeah.
That's
I'm
all
good
we
with
can
that.
ask, the best but we needed an updated estimate as of that time.
And keep in mind, our state budget cycle does not
weird.
jive with the local municipalities. Every time local municipalities set their budgets, and then the
Yeah.
state does their little sausage making, and all bets are off. So,
Yeah, and like us, we don't anticipate that what the governor suggested is actually what's gonna pass. But we don't know.
But the
So
only
we
thing,
made our preparations for the worst-case scenario.
and you
And
write
this
it
year
down and
was
you say,
literally a week after the election
Yeah.
that the information really came out about what was gonna happen to the
Well,
It's that way
and
every year.
throwing school districts away.
Right, and the reason
ridiculous.
for me bringing this up has to do with something at the 11th hour, which I won't get into, because it doesn't matter, it's looking backwards. But a last minute thing that came up in December, I think it was,
We were here.
We were sitting
We
right
were sitting
there.
over there.
and it
We
was,
know.
We
it
weren't officially
really,
here, but,
it just really rubs people the wrong way, and if we
Yeah.
truly all want this to go better, then it's okay to,
and what he doesn't realize is that Andrew's asleep back there.
Andrew's asleep. Asleep, which means we're off the air now.
okay, so
And with
be
that, I'm
careful
done.
when we finish and adjourn, if we don't wake them up, the
Vote to
mics are
adjourn.
still live, okay?
Leave quietly.
Interesting, and we don't know, we're making
Motion to
fun of
adjourn.
Andrew and I can't
Did
see
that
him from
already.
here.
We did?
I did.
Second it.
The next meeting is, next month, June 8th. Let's keep in mind what you're thinking about budgets and tax rates and how you would like to proceed. Because next month, I'm gonna ask you if you want to take the months of July and August off, as we normally do. School board does. You guys still work because that's what it is, and to see what you wanna do with that, so I'm gonna ask you that next month. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have one motion before Sue to have Bill Bates in representing the Budget Committee for the dunk booth. Is there a second on that?
I can't possibly be the most hated person. Come on. I may be hated, but I can't be the most hated person.
No,
I've only been here for a year, for God's sake.
Move to adjourn.
Did Sue,
Yeah, I did.
do I have a second?
He seconded it a long time
All
ago.
right, all those in favor, I need
Ah,
hands.
get on it.
I need hands.
Jeez.
We are adjourned, thank you.